This is Force 13 Live. We've got more coverage for the next 3 hours on Hurricane Irma and also the two other systems that we've got active right now in the form of Hurricane Jose, which has intensified just now to reach hurricane status right behind Irma, and Tropical Storm Katia, which may well be a hurricane in a matter of minutes as soon as their update comes in. I don't know whether it's in or not yet, but I'm joined by several of our members here, Strat, Craig and Cesar. Any news on Katia, first of all?
Well, Katia right now changed its movement now to the southeast, still moving pretty slow, only 2 miles per hour. And it's not expected to intensify that fast. But of course, it will be enough strong to cause some destruction in the state of Veracruz once enters to once enters to land, maybe by Friday or Saturday in the morning. So, well, for the state of Veracruz, it is well, just people, of course, have to take all the precautions, the same precautions that they took when Franklin came. Fortunately, there were no victims during Franklin, and I hope the same from Katia. I don't know, you guys, what do you think about it?
Well, we just got back here at HQ, so I'm updating all of the graphics right now. This was the last graphics that we had up here from the National Hurricane Center during Irma, and obviously that's still the main system that we are tracking, and I'm just awaiting the further updates. But the latest here is that Jose is a hurricane with winds of 75 miles an hour, and the update on Katia should be coming in shortly. But I'm trying to get the maps for Irma and just updating them briefly. Obviously the storm was about to pass through the Virgin Islands when we were broadcasting last. That has occurred, and now it's on the other side, just north of the Virgin Islands and just north of Puerto Rico, and is likely to move towards the Turks and Caicos Islands, north of the Hispaniola, and towards the United States eventually, where I believe people are already evacuating in Florida, which I think is quite early to do so, but Craig, what are your thoughts? Is Craig here? Oh, I can't hear Craig. I'm not sure if there's a problem.
Maybe.
That's very odd. I could hear Craig not so long ago at all, but for some reason I can't hear Craig right now. I'm going to try again. But Cesar, in the meantime, what do you think of the latest on Irma?
Well, after the new update that has came out just shortly, well, now it's confirmed that Irma is the first hurricane in the whole Atlantic to maintain above 180 miles per hour for 24 hours. So this is a really concerning situation, and incredible, and well, for me it is incredible. I never expected something like that. Of course, the warnings are now in effect for some parts of the Bahamas, the whole north part of Hispaniola, Turks and Caicos Islands as well, and practically 3/4 of Cuba are in hurricane watch as well.
Yeah.
So
I think we can hear Craig now, so I want him to speak for a while just in case we lose him again.
Yes, of course.
Craig?
Yeah, hopefully not.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just going to go to Jose real quick. The NHC is forecasting, and I know probably people are already getting sick of hearing the word major hurricane. the National Hurricane Center are expecting Jose to become a Category 3 hurricane with winds of 115 miles an hour. Well then, and well, my thoughts on Katia. It's a pretty weird but interesting storm to track, especially in this part of the Gulf of Mexico. I know Recon found possibly close to hurricane force winds, maybe at hurricane force. I know they're finished their mission, and I know the track is very, very weird for Katia, and expecting it to move. Well, current movement of the NHC forecast is east southeast at 5 miles an hour, and expect to become a hurricane. To be honest, I don't know whether this thing will become a hurricane in the next update, but it might do. Especially if Recon has found hurricane force winds. But if it becomes a hurricane, I don't know. When was the last time I think we did. When was the last? I don't actually, I can't remember. When was the last time we actually had 3 Atlantic hurricanes active at the same time?
Well, it must have been 2010.
I think that might be accurate. I think. I'll actually have a look for that. I don't know whether anyone else wants to take the floor whilst I have a look for that.
Well, we've not heard from Strat yet, so go ahead, Strat, with your thoughts right now.
My thoughts, of course, Irma's extremely dangerous. As Caesar said, it is a record breaker in terms of maintaining its intensity. And looking at satellites and stuff, it's actually improved in how it looks as of the past few hours as well. About Jose and Katia, Katia might already be a hurricane. That's what the ATCF says. Jose for sure is. And both of them are not really as important at the moment, but Katia can impact Mexico and will do.
Here's the latest visible imagery of Irma right now as we wait for more information on this storm and obviously on Katia, which also may be a hurricane shortly, and we will have that surreal situation. But what is potentially more surreal is what you're looking at on the visible imagery right now, just north of the Virgin Islands. Irma slowly moving away, which means that Puerto Rico doesn't look like it will have as bad conditions as what the Virgin Islands will have just seen, which is, I guess, something, but it still looks like it might end up being pretty bad. It doesn't look like the inner eye wall will affect Puerto Rico, at least. And again, we're looking at that, what is quite mesmerizing in its imagery, in my opinion at least, of the storm continuing to draw further towards the west here. I don't know if you guys have the update at all, because I'm not currently looking.
An update on Irma from the NHC? It's only advisory 30A and it remains 185 miles an hour. But that's not the full advisory, so...
Okay.
I think it'll remain 185 miles an hour in the next advisory anyway.
Well, we'll wait for that news before we do anything in particular right now. But if you've got any questions that you want to ask us, you can send them in. For instance, will it make landfall in St. Lucie, Florida? A very specific place for a landfall. And I can't give a very specific answer to that, as you may well know. I mean, odds are against the landfall in that particular location, but there could be hurricane force winds in that particular location. In the meantime, if we can possibly get some information about Jose, and by the way, it's expected to become a major hurricane in the next few days and reach Category 3 status, as Craig said earlier. And another one that could affect the Leeward Islands, and that would be terrible, wouldn't it?
Would be the last thing that...
I pulled up on screen.
Want to hear another.
I pulled up the visible of Jose on the screen share, and you can see that it
One
has
moment.
developed a high wall.
The microwave imagery.
Mm-hmm.
There it is.
Ah, the thing that does 24 hours but doesn't give you the recent one.
No, it's like
Still good. It's still
2
good
hours
enough to
behind
use.
or so.
Still good enough to use though.
That's the 2 hours behind, but you can still see that that Jose does develop an eye wall and intensifies.
Yes, indeed. I'm not sure what my mics have been like recently. I think I just turned the wrong one on before, but you could still hear me. It would have sounded pretty terrible. Anyway, but here we are right now with the 3 storms, and we're still waiting for the update before an update on Katia. It is a hurricane, and a hurricane watch is in effect for Tucpan to Laguna Verde in Mexico. So it's now a hurricane and likely to reach winds of 90 miles per hour in its forecast, and we're awaiting the update on Irma. So the breaking news is that we have 3 hurricanes active in the Atlantic. One of them a category 5, the 2 others a category 1.
Good lord, 3 hurricanes.
Cesar, what are your instant thoughts on that since you're over in Mexico? Is he with us?
I don't know. It says he's still.
He might be having his own connection problems or
Might be.
anything.
But 3 hurricanes in the Atlantic, and now that's the first ever time I've literally ever seen that. The first ever time I've seen that.
Someone asked in chat why isn't Katia a hurricane yet? It is the national
It
hurricane
is now.
center, just updated it.
It is now a category 1 hurricane.
I haven't seen the update exactly
You
because I have my
think
screen share up and I'm
3
looking.
hurricanes?
Yeah. What does it say? Katia's exact strength is? I can't look because I got screen share up and I'm looking at chat on my phone. Someone said the next advisory is out as well on Irma. I don't know if they meant Irma. Let me check.
It still says
still
38.
Yeah, the update is out on Irma right now, and the current... there's a new hurricane warning for the central Bahamas, by the way, and the current wind speed remains at 185 miles an hour with a pressure of 914 millibars. And there's now a tropical storm warning in Cuba, further into Cuba, as far as Las Tunas, and the hurricane warning in St. Martin and St. Bart's has been discontinued. So we've got some more information on what is now a triple hurricane threat, perhaps, considering that Jose could meander near the Leeward Islands as well, but certainly triple hurricanes, probably for the first time since 2010.
Yeah. And did they lower the pressure to 914 in the 5 p.m. update?
Yes.
Yes, they did.
That's 4 millibars lower than the hour, or that's 6 lower than the previous hour, actually.
Wow.
So that's a big drop in pressure. It's harder to get exact data at the minute because there is a recon in the storm, but it was having equipment problems and malfunctions, so we can't necessarily trust all the data coming out of that one right now. And I'm double checking to see if the track forecast is updated at all.
No, that won't
Can
happen
you
for
guys-
a little while yet. Cesar?
No.
Probably a few minutes.
Sorry for disappearing. I had a glitch. And responding to the question that Nathan asked to me, that what are my thoughts about the triple hurricane now? First of all, with Irma, I heard that the people in Florida right now are practically in the stores and buying all the things they need in case of emergency if the hurricane makes landfall. About Katia or whatever you want to pronounce it, of course is going to be a concern in Mexico as well if this small system intensifies quickly. It's just, I don't know, but it's just a little reminder of Carl because it was a
Wow.
really small system, but intensified really quickly and became one of the costliest hurricanes in Mexico actually.
Yes.
So, of course, people should take note of that and of course, starting preparing. And about Jose, just hope doesn't make landfall in the Leeward Islands. Just stay out of any land and dies in the sea.
Yeah, there was a question in chat. Someone asked what are the chances of Irma getting to 190 miles an hour?
Oh dear.
Depending on how far north it moves away from Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, and Haiti, there is that chance that it might just manage to do so. Because looking at SSTs, the SSTs in the ocean heat content is to be greater. The SSTs are to be getting warmer as Irma heads towards the Bahamas. So it remains to be seen. There is that very small chance that it could become that. That would be one of the most horrific hurricanes I've seen. My Atlantic hurricane season experiences so far. 190 for the time being, it's a bit questionable, but if it does
It's
pull
not going
away
to happen
far
at
enough,
the moment.
yeah, that's what I was saying. It is a small chance, but if it does pull far enough away from Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic and Haiti, then there is that chance that it could do. But and as far as I can tell, and as far as I'm going to say right now, there is that. I'm going to reword that. It's too early to tell so far, but there is the chance that it could. It's a small chance that it could do.
Yeah, and someone asked if we have any updates with Barbuda. From what I heard, because the island is isolated and sparsely populated, they can't get any planes or anything to land there until after the storm is completely cleared out. So we don't know. We just have to wait and see what happens over the next day or so before we can send anything in.
So here are some more images of Irma, and you can see on the left panel Strat's display, and on the right hand side the NOAA floaters. And we'll have more on the latest warnings for you shortly. We're just ticking over to 9 PM UTC on this September 6th, and we have 3 hurricanes active if you have just joined us. Hurricane watches have been issued in Mexico and warnings remain in the Caribbean. We will be updating the bottom of our ticker there shortly. We're now joined by the voice of Marcel. Hi Marcel, how are you?
Fine.
What are your thoughts of 3 hurricanes active in the Atlantic right now?
I think that is a record.
No, it's not a record. It last occurred in 2010. I believe it also occurred in 1998 and 95. However,
the closest I've came to that, I was just checking that, I was going to come to that, that there was 3 storms active at the same time, 2 of which were Category 4 hurricanes, but the other was just a tropical storm.
Right.
Back in 2010.
Yeah. All right. So we're still looking at Irma, and I'm trying to get some more imagery at this point, but things are a little bit difficult today. But we've also got the 1-minute imagery, and I've got a close-up of the 1-minute imagery, which is really fascinating, if nothing else. There it is, the storm, and just about on the southern part of that graphic, as it updates there, you can just about see Puerto Rico. That's the coastline of Puerto Rico on the bottom left hand side, and there we are with the full picture. And the wide shot, nope, it's not that, that's Strat's display. There's the wide shot of Irma right now.
I was just going to ask Nathan, how's that 1-minute imagery been behaving? cooperating, or has it been breaking?
Rather well, yes.
It's just that the other, just for those that don't know, that RAM and a lot of the sites, even the National Hurricane Center, which is understandable, has been pretty much unusable. But then again, NHC is perfectly understandable because you've got a lot of people wanting to know where Irma is going to go and how strong it's going to be. But RAM is also being an absolute nightmare to use in terms of speed. The IR slider has been an absolute nightmare. The website itself
The
will
new
not
cone is
load
out now
correctly.
as well, Craig. The new cone is out. I'm trying to get it onto the screen here, but
Yeah, I'm trying to load it as well, but it's going really slow right now with the site.
we'll have it shortly.
Yeah. And obviously not just the only ones that have had problems. There's a lot of the tropical tidbit policy page has been on board all day. Pretty much, it's been dead alive, dead, incredibly slow, and I mean painfully
Like your signal.
slow. And then it comes back to life. This is the I expect when, and a lot of people expect. Is my Discord glitchy by any chance? Because I feel
Just a little bit.
There's two questions. Someone asked if Irma slows down to reach 190 miles
People
an
are obsessed with this wanting to be 190 miles an hour.
I don't.
because they want it to be
People,
typing.
Irma won't get 190 miles per hour.
that is a bold prediction, no, but yeah, there is the chance that it couldn't.
I have to point
In
out
fact,
the
probably high chance.
I have to point out the actions of a few despicable people earlier this evening.
Yes.
Mindless children, basically, who are lauding and applauding the feats of Irma in recent days as it's been
Yes.
traversing the islands, and we certainly do not condone that. We indeed condemn that, and people like that will never be given airtime on any of our productions, and it's something that should be mentioned at this point. But what we do bring to you is the reality of what is currently occurring with the storm, and there's certainly no spin in any direction from us here, unlike many media outlets indeed. We say it as it is, and unfortunately the reality is that there's a hell of a lot of unknowns, and for Florida in particular, it's not a great place to live if you don't like uncertainty with hurricanes, because it's never really certain until the last few hours in the case of Florida, as we saw with Matthew last year, and as we're going to see with Irma, exactly where it's going to hit, if it hits at all.
Yeah, I pulled it up on screen share right now, the current new map, if you guys want me to show that off.
Yeah.
So I have it up right here. Tropical storm warning, just based off of looking at this, I haven't actually looked at all the new warnings yet. Tropical storm warning has been issued for the eastern part of Cuba, and if I'm not mistaken, the watches have extended further west into Cuba for hurricane watches.
Yeah, that was the breaking news that we had earlier on when they just released the information.
Yeah, the major new thing is it's a little bit further west than the earlier track, and
Slightly.
And the new forecast cone for the end as full 5 days shows it just off the coast of Georgia instead. It now puts a landfall right over Miami, but that's of course 4 days out.
And
so
that
that's not
4-day dot there is with winds of 145 miles an hour, according to their forecast.
145 or 55?
145. 145.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and right now, it's the heart of the storm. Well, not the heart, but it's mostly hitting Puerto Rico right now, the storm overall. That's the current biggest threat. And since we're here, I will go over the watches and warnings with the storm. So there is a hurricane warning in effect for the British Virgin Islands, U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Vieques, and Culebra, Dominican Republic from Cabo Engano to the northern border with Haiti, Haiti from the northern border with Dominican Republic to Les St. Nicholas, southeastern Bahamas and Turks and Caicos Islands, and the central Bahamas are all under hurricane warnings. Watch is in effect for Cuba from Matanzas province eastward to Guantanamo province in northwestern Bahamas, and tropical storm warnings in effect for Dominican Republic, south of Papua and Ghana, westward to the southern border with Haiti. So all Dominican Republic's in a tropical storm or hurricane warning at the moment. Haiti's tropical storm warning from south of Limol, St. Nicholas to Port-au-Prince. The Cuban provinces of Guantanamo, Holguin, and Las Tunas are also under tropical storm warnings. And those are all the current warnings at the moment.
And in a few moments you will be able to see that reflected on the bottom of your screen as I get that updated slowly but surely. Unfortunately, we don't have anyone to do that for me. I have to do it myself.
Someone asked why, or they said, can you tell me what Irma is considered as far as the strongest hurricane list? You guys want to answer that?
Officially,
yeah, it's not
second,
the strongest hurricane ever.
Officially second strongest, by my records third in the Atlantic. We're now joined by Hank, by the way. That was his voice, and welcome.
Yeah, thank you for the welcome, Nathan. Yeah, Irma, geez, that's all I can say for the moment, per se. But I mean, no, this is not the strongest storm ever recorded in the Atlantic, because true intensity of the storm is measured by pressure and not wind. So, and by wind, by pressure, this thing is like, I think, number 10 in the satellite era, at least, for the strongest. If we count non-satellite, that's probably like 12 or something, but that's not the point. This thing, to my knowledge, has made 4 Category 5 landfalls. Correct me if I'm wrong.
We probably won't know exactly. It's at least 3, I should think.
At least 3, okay. Even then, assuming it is 4, that is the most Category 5 landfalls for any Atlantic hurricane on record. More than Andrew, more than any other storm you could think of. The storm breaks it. 4 is, yeah, it passed through a group of islands, so it's a bit different than most Category 5s, but landfalls is just incredible.
That's impressive.
Very impressive.
Impressive and horrifying.
Yeah, that's the other thing. It's impressive yet horrifying, because I know some people who have relatives who live in Puerto Rico. I know people who have relatives who are the Virgin Islands, and they're incredibly scared to see what it will be like for that, what it could have already been like, because I could just only imagine what the damage on Barbuda is right now. It's got to be immense. I can't see how it can't be.
Yeah.
But getting back on what's currently happening right now, the eye appears to be shrinking. There's probably some sort of eye wall replacement cycle beginning to come into effect, because the convection is beginning to increase, and it looks like the influence of the CDO is also increasing. So there's probably some sort of eye wall replacement cycle going on right now. Really quick, let me see if I can get I know that this is a pretty radar source, so let me just see if I can confirm what I'm thinking.
Yeah, and while you're doing that, someone asked if the storm can get stronger pressure-wise. I'm pretty sure that we can all agree that that's possible, but it actually has over the past hour. It's dropped 6 millibars in pressure in the past hour. So yes, definitely. And
hold on, stronger than what in pressure?
Just pressure. They're asking if it can drop in general.
Oh, okay. I thought you were meaning like it would get record-breaking. It's like, I don't think that's happening, but yeah, it could definitely get deeper. And Only
Someone
time.
also asked how wide the storm is relative to Florida. Well, if you just like drag it with a map and put Florida right on top of the hurricane, it's the size of all of southern Florida. If you squish Florida all together, it'd easily be the size of all of Florida. But if the center was over a part of Florida, most of the panhandle would be affected at the same time.
Yeah, so here's the current radar imagery for Irma right now, moving to the north. It's currently northeast of the eastern tip of Puerto Rico. And as you can see, that's a very well-defined hurricane. And the quality on this isn't the greatest
Yeah,
in the
Hank,
world.
you might want to use instead the San Juan National Weather Service radar.
Oh yeah, I completely forgot about that. That was able to be helpful. 1 second. I don't usually use a National Weather Service radar because it's not the best quality, but this is pretty good. So you can see here we got the eye. Yeah, there's definitely some sort of there's definitely concentric eye walls within this system. The outermost eye wall is just clipping the northeastern edge of Puerto Rico, and the rest of the Virgin Islands, which have obviously been hammered throughout the past multiple hours. And you got the inner eye wall in there, which is better defined, obviously, and got the eye itself. This whole thing, I've never really used the National Weather Service radar, so I don't think there's a way to animate this. But I would assume that it is. Well, I mean, I know that it's moving on a general west-northwest course, and a landfall in Puerto Rico is highly unlikely. It would have to take a big southwest dip, but the landfall really doesn't matter, because if you get even a portion of the eye wall, you're getting the strongest winds that the storm has to offer anywhere within it, supposedly, and you're also getting the heaviest rain. And along the northern coast of Puerto Rico, you're also getting a lot of storm surge from this. And I mean, I heard some reports saying that there could be as much as 20 feet of storm surge.
The news on the wires from Barbuda is that there is total destruction, almost 100% of homes totally destroyed, and 1 fatality.
Also, by the way, Hank, if you want to loop it, there's near the left side below, like the adjacent radars, there's some loop buttons that you can press.
Currently 1 reported.
Oh, here it is. Okay. That's okay.
The ones further up towards the top, like the composite.
No, yeah, I got it.
There you go.
So yeah, this is the loop of this. As I said earlier, this is the first time I really use this because I don't normally use any of this weather radar, whatever. It shows that the storm is moving, west-northwest, and that, I mean, this is such a beautiful yet terrifying loop right here. And all I can say for those of you who are being impacted or are going to be impacted by Irma here is that, assuming that the storm maintains its intensity, which it remarkably has, and I will put this out there, this thing has remained 185 miles an hour for, I think, 30 hours now. That's remarkable. The old record for a storm that stayed 180 miles an hour or greater for this amount of time does not exist. So Allen was 180 for, I think, 18 hours. This has been it for 30, so this has broken Allen's record. This is also the strongest hurricane anywhere in the Atlantic Ocean, not counting the Gulf of Mexico or Caribbean Sea.
Right, also, someone's asking what an eye roll replacement cycle is and whether or not it's good or bad. Do you want to explain that?
Yeah, so basically what an eye roll replacement cycle is you have the storm, if it really strengthens to kind of the level Irma's at, or a lot lower even, it has to adjust its core in some way. And one way to do that is an eye roll replacement cycle. What happens there is every storm of at least category 2 strength has some sort of an eye wall, and it's the eye. Sometimes the storm needs to go underneath an adjustment to fix some irregularities within the storm, and one way to do that is to develop a second eye wall. And that normally develops from some sort of bands that all clump together to form another ring around the eye wall, which becomes a secondary eye wall. And what that does is that chokes off the inner eye wall and deprives its energy. So the inner eye wall dissipates and the outer eye wall becomes dominant, and you get a new and normally larger eye. Now, during that process, the storm's wind speeds normally decrease. However, the extent of those winds increase, and the cloud tops cool, which mean that the thunderstorms become more intense. So, yes, the winds go down, but the influence and the strength of the thunderstorms go up. So it's not necessarily a good thing. It doesn't really impact storm surge because it just doesn't really work like that. But it really does. And this storm has done a bunch of these within the past week. I think it's done like at least somewhere around 7 or maybe even 8 of these eye roll placement cycles. And that's just because the storm just can't get its act together correctly in the fashion that it wants to get to the strongest. It could, but then it did before it got to Leeward Islands, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
So that's basically what an eye roll placement cycle is for anybody curious.
If it's okay with you, I want to take over the screen share just because I have a smoother radar loop, and then you can also answer. Someone is asking whether or not an eyeball replacement cycle is a good thing or a bad thing.
And we're still looking at Irma on the bottom left hand side of our screen and on the radar loop. Of course, now we have 3 hurricanes active, and if anyone has any further questions, the team and myself are on hand here. And
well, actually, I just wanted to point this out there. 3 hurricanes out there. So both Irma, Jose, and Katia, or Katia, all 3 are of hurricane strength. This is the first time this has happened since 2010, and we all know how huge that hurricane season was. Not saying that this year will be another 2010, but it's just a testament to how significant this hurricane season has been so far.
Well, we're right in the thick of it at the moment, and 2010's peak was around now as well, wasn't it?
Towards mid-September, maybe even getting a little bit towards the latter half, because that's when we had those 3 hurricanes, and 2 of those hurricanes became majors at the same point. I think Category 4s at the same point as well.
You would think that this is the biggest part of the season right now, the spectacle that we're witnessing with these 3 hurricanes, but we still could get further occasions where we might get 2 hurricanes at the same time a little bit later on.
Definitely plausible, but I mean, it's that normally September is the time, mid-September, that's normally the biggest part of the hurricane season, and it's early September, so I guess we're just in one portion of the peak per se. And I mean, being completely honest, I think what we're seeing right now is probably the most we're gonna get in terms of the amount of activity, or excuse me, the amount of accumulated cyclone energy during at the same time for this specific season.
Well, there's plenty more to come from Irma, at least. I want to move on, if I can, to some more questions.
Go ahead.
What happens if 2 hurricanes collide? Well, that doesn't really happen. I'm sure Hank will want to explain why.
No, it doesn't work like that, because you would think that, if you watch some sort of Hollywood disaster or whatever, that you get 2 small hurricanes that collide into this one big monster. It doesn't work like that. Hurricanes are not just 2 points in space. Well, really big, massive, functioning, swirling storms. And that's the swirling part. Like, the way that it rotates around the central core is why they can't collide. So what they do is that you have 2 hurricanes get close to each other, and they don't collide. Instead, they do this dance around each other. This is what we call the Fujiwara effect. And then they kind of orbit the central point, kind of like a binary star system, or maybe even like they're spinning around on a turntable per se. They can't collide unless now one can be absorbed in the other if it's a lot weaker. That's what happened in 2005 when after Tropical Storm Alpha made landfall in the Dominican Republic. It moved off Hispaniola and was very weak, and Hurricane Wilma was coming off of Florida as a major hurricane and just absorbed what was left of Tropical Storm Irma. It was still a tropical storm, so it was the center of it was absorbed into Wilma's circulation.
Yeah,
so
and,
two storms can't combine. Really.
Yeah, someone asked if we can show the spaghetti plots for Irma and Florida in particular, and I will oblige and do so and refresh this. The tracks are initially further east earlier today from a eastward shift that occurred yesterday. In general, they had a landfall around South Carolina and North Carolina border, but they switched over towards Georgia and South Carolina, and that's a pretty high-level consensus at the moment.
Yeah. Another thing that's pretty interesting to note is the very close brush with the Miami area. Now, hurricanes that hit Miami from this angle are not very common. The only storm I can really think, or there's something that did this, Hurricane King of 1950 and Hurricane Cleo of 1964. Both those storms hit Miami from this kind of an angle, and both those storms were very bad storms for the Miami area. Not saying that this storm will be the same, but it's definitely possible same. Now, after Miami, if it continues moving north like this and pretty much rides the Florida coast, as we all know, that's a terrible scenario after past experience from last year. This is a situation that we can't take lightly. Offshore will cause huge effects. Again, look at last year with Matthew. Rode up the entire Florida coast, never made landfall, but you still got those significant impacts along the coast, even though you didn't even get the eye wall, you still got significant impacts. So it doesn't take much really to cause significant damage, and the hurricane landfall is very much at all really. The only storm with this kind of a path, not counting the next 72 hours, but the only storm with this kind of a path would be Hurricane David of 1979 after 72 hours. And that rode up the Florida coast and made landfall in Savannah. Category 1 or 2, not too sure. But that was also a pretty significant storm. For Hispaniola more than Florida, but regardless, it was still a pretty significant storm in the southeast.
I'm showing the spaghetti plots for someone right now. It's just interesting to note out the path consensus is actually a bit tighter 4 to 5 days than it is around 3 days. I'm assuming that's because there's a little bit of disagreement on how the northward turn will occur. And someone asked that considering that Irma's maintained its intensity for 30 hours, is that a red flag for Florida? Well, models already show a pretty tight consensus in general at the moment. But regardless of that, the current strength forecast, and keep in mind that strength forecasting is the least accurate forecasting area, it still shows 145 miles an hour right when it's over Miami. And that is a extremely strong hurricane that will bring lots of damage with it. So it's already a red flag at the moment. There's already a state of emergency that was already put up 2 days ago in advance, about a week in advance of Irma, but they decided to do that. So it is already a red flag.
Right. And another thing that's really crucial with the storm is where this northward turn will occur, because that will determine where the biggest impacts of Irma will occur. If it turns right over the peninsula, then that's probably the worst case scenario, because it's not just state that gets the biggest impacts. It's all of the eastern coast or even western coast, depending on where it decides to turn, that will feel the brunt of its impacts. If it goes just offshore, then it'll be less impact, still significant, but less. So say if it turns like around Andros Island and then hits Grand Bahama and then moves north towards the Carolinas, that's still on the table. It's more confident now that it's going to turn pretty much where Strat showed you, where the models are in consensus near the Miami area, and then right up the Florida coast hit Georgia for South Carolina.
Yeah, and sorry to interrupt.
Well,
The thing I circled is Andros Island, by the way.
Okay, so that, you know, it could really just it's still kind of far out, but not as far out. There's a lot more certainty now than there was, say, on Sunday and Monday, where we were kind of just say this thing could move into the Gulf, this thing could recurve out to sea. There's a lot more certainty now with the forecast. And intensity-wise, NHC has it as a Category 4 hurricane right on top of Miami, I believe, in about 5 days. Not to alarm you, but just going to let you know that's what the forecast is, and you should be getting your preparations underway if you haven't already, and they should be complete in about 2 days, so before the hurricane actually gets to that area. Now, there's still the possibility that it could move south and hit Hispaniola. That scenario is a lot less likely now, but it's still definitely possible. And that could knock off a few categories, but it could easily just re-strengthen right back into the storm that it was predicted to do so initially if it moves through the Florida Straits, because the Florida Straits are a very just dangerous area for a storm to be. The storms can go off in an instant, really, in that part of the Atlantic. You look at the 1935.
Just some news about Antigua, from what I hear, is that there is no loss of life on Antigua, but on Barbuda at least one fatality, and the condition of Barbuda is not fully known for obvious reasons, because it's the first island that the storm made landfall on with its eye. Antigua didn't get the eye, and we're very anxious to hear from places like St. Martin and Anguilla and St. Bart's and the British Virgin Islands, which all had the eye as well.
Yeah, I guess it's good to hear that there's less loss of life than initially thought, but there's still loss of life, which is still a terrible thing to have happen. Another thing that, never mind, that's pretty much what you just said, so I'll scratch that.
Yeah, someone asked in chat if the storm is still annular. The storm was never completely annular, and it isn't right now as well.
Yeah, if anything. Not losing intensity, but losing annularity.
It's always tempting to make comments like, this storm looks like X, and I don't know if you've got any of those right now.
Oh. I mean, maybe Isabel at one point, but that's what I've always been saying.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I don't know where we are with it now. But anyway, those models, and people take a look at all of those models a lot, and quite a lot of people take one model and elevate it above all of the others, and that's not a very good thing to do. So we take a look at all of the models here.
Yeah, someone just asked in chat whether or not to trust the Euro.
I mean, all models are good in their own right. I mean, but remember that they are still computers, and they still don't know everything or can get everything correct. Models are not forecasts. They're just simple outputs due to and just steering the storm and what they think could happen. Models vary from run to run, and there's never one set solution. So if you see Irma on top of Canaveral in about 5 days at 150 miles an hour, don't take that as reality. Take that with a grain of salt and realize that the model is going to one way or another. Now, am I saying it happened? No, because it certainly could, but the chances of the model actually coming true are very low indeed, regardless of any sort of consensus that there is.
And because someone asked about the Euro, I have it pulled up. I'll just show quickly. It actually takes it a bit further south than the other models, bringing it closer to Hispaniola and closer to Cuba as well than the other models do right now. And it brings up Irma, strengthens it right in between the Florida Strait and brings it into Miami. You can also note that it brought Jose dangerously close to the northern leewards as well. And then it brings it up a similar way that the GFS does, riding the Florida coast, then moving in towards Georgia as well. So that is the Euro at the moment.
And we all know that the last thing that the Leeward Islands need is yet another hurricane.
And I'm quite worried about that. There could be some hurricane watches coming back into effect for some of those islands within the next 24 hours.
Yeah, I will actually, I will throw up
Please
Jose's
show us the
right
track map for that, because that's important as well.
It might take a little bit though, just because, you know, the hurricane center is, you know, extremely
mind-numbingly slow.
So while it loads, I'll just go back to the radar loop at the moment, just while that page loads up. And as we were talking about earlier, there is the beginnings of an eyewall replacement cycle underway. You can see a second eyewall forming around the initial one and starting to try to move in a little bit. And let me check, that isn't loaded yet.
Yeah, we're looking at several image shots here on the sides of the screen. Gives you plenty of choices of things to look at. 3 of the images are Irma. The one on the bottom right there is Katia, and how that's been progressing in the last few frames. Doesn't look very hurricane-like.
Hello?
That's Orlando, by the way, and welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Where do you want to begin?
Well, I'd like to begin with the fact that Irma has been looking quite astounding over the last 24 hours. How it's been able to maintain its intensity for such a long period of time is quite amazing, but also is equally as dangerous for the Lesser Antilles, which is about finished, and now Puerto Rico, which is soon getting very nastily close to. And anyone on the island should prepare, and for anyone in Florida should also monitor this storm closely and start getting some things ready just in case it ends up heading for your area.
Yeah,
I also heard earlier, by the way, that Georgia is in a state of emergency now, and North Carolina is declaring a state of emergency at 8 a.m. tomorrow.
Yeah, and if you guys are wondering why these areas are calling states of emergency so early, federal funds are kind of strained right now from Hurricane Harvey. So declaring a state of emergency allows you to get your hands on federal funds, so that's why they're declaring so early. And I just pulled up the map of Jose, and I circled the areas that were just impacted by Irma the hardest, 3 or 4 Category 5 landfalls on these islands. And you can see the track brings Jose very uncomfortably close to these islands. Some of them are right around where my mouse is, are actually in the cone.
It's almost like Louisa Marilyn, isn't it?
Yeah, and instead of earlier, now they are forecasting Jose to be a major hurricane. You see, they currently forecast the peak of the storm to actually be closer to these islands as well.
It's just terrible that
Barbuda's in the cone.
Yeah, Barbuda just got a hard hit. And
I think it's actually in the 3-day cone.
Yeah, just about.
And keep in mind, a track shift only 50 miles to the south, or they push it a little bit further west before a north turn, that puts these islands that were just hit really hard, especially Barbuda and Antigua, which were the epicenter, the very start of a landfall, were be probably under hurricane watches and warnings again if that's the case, and that would be devastating to say the least if they have to go through 2 major hurricanes in less than a week.
Yeah, that would be absolutely horrifying to think about. But people in Barbuda that managed to make it out, and people in Antigua and northern Lesser Antilles, which have just made it out of Irma, and whoever still has power. If you're watching this stream, basically just keep an eye on out for the storm, because this could be the next big one for you. And it's sad that you people have to go through this, and it's just terrifying to think about that. Category 5 hurricane just passed, and they're going to get another major hurricane hitting you soon after.
Yeah, and someone asked about recon. So
There has not been a recon pass into Irma's.
yeah,
That
there was a glitch in the recon, so they called it back.
I think there was
They
just a
did have
glitch on our
drop
stream
zone
there
today.
as well, but go ahead.
There was measurement errors, like wind measurement errors with the plane. They were having difficulty problems, so they called it back. But it did measure a drop zone in at 915 millibars of pressure while it was leaving out of the storm after its last eye pass.
and the winds at that were about 10 knots, so one can only assume that it was close to 9-11 maybe,
And
which is remarkably low.
Yeah, and it does say there's a training mission, but it doesn't look like there's any specific recons heading out into Irma at the moment, which, at least for us information-wise, isn't really the best thing in general to see.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they can't really have recon in the storm all the time. Like, jet fuel is really expensive, and having all of these tools that they put into the hurricane are also really expensive. So just having so many planes out there at a time, there really isn't financially a good idea. Yes, we need the data, but we can't really get it all the time with all this financial demand that there is.
Yeah, that makes
So
sense. I was about to say that.
I'm going to try really quickly. I'm going to reiterate. I'm going to go ahead and reiterate some of the warnings that are in effect.
Yeah, here, I will pull that up for you as well.
I got it. So this is basically a summary of all of the watches and warnings that are in effect for Hurricane Irma right now. So a hurricane warning, which means that hurricane conditions are predicted within the next and there's at least a good 50-50 chance of that happening. Hurricane warning is in effect for the British Virgin Islands, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Vizcaya, Culebra, the Dominican Republic from Cabo Anago to the northern border with Haiti, Haiti from the northern border with the Dominican Republic to Lemos St. Nicholas, the southeastern Bahamas, the Turks and Caicos Islands, and the central Bahamas are all under hurricane warnings. A hurricane watch, which means hurricane conditions are possible within the next 60 hours, and there's at least a 30% chance of that happening. Hurricane watch is in effect for Cuba from I'm sorry if I butcher this, but Matanzas province eastward to Guantanamo province in Cuba, as well as the northwestern Bahamas. That probably includes the capital, Nassau. Tropical storm warning, which is the same thing as a hurricane warning, except for tropical storm conditions, and that is in effect from the Dominican Republic from south of Cabo Anago westward to the southern border with Haiti, and Haiti from south of Lemos St. Nicholas to Port-au-Prince, as well as the Cuba provinces of Guantanamo, Holguin, and Las Tunas. There are no tropical storm watches in effect for this system. And to give you some sort of a graphic, if you're not very geographically keen, this is basically what is the general picture of the cone and the warnings.
Yeah, it doesn't.
That'll take you some time. Oh, it's there.
It doesn't have a screen share on right now, so I pulled it up and it actually came up pretty quickly. But this is the current watches and warnings. Red is hurricane warnings. Blue is tropical storm warnings, and pink is hurricane watches. And I saw someone ask if it's going to hit Miami. All models do indicate at some impact for Florida at the moment. It's too early to tell the exact point of where it'll actually pass. That's going to take at least a few days more to actually get pinpoint location. But it is pretty likely that Miami does get impacts from the storm.
Or at least effects from it. The effects are pretty much guaranteed.
And someone asked the strength of the storm. It is, as of 5 p.m. according to the National Hurricane Center, it is 185 mile an hour sustained winds, which is a record breaker for the amount of time sustaining winds of over 180 miles an hour, and 914 millibars, which is significantly stronger than the previous update.
Yeah.
Let's see.
It's not looking good whatsoever for the islands, and Bahamas is going to have a really bad time, and the northern coast of the Dominican Republic is also not going to have a really good time either in the next 24 hours.
The only thing that's good, really, I say the word good loosely, but the only thing that will be less of an impact for the Dominican Republic is storm surge, because it's a very mountainous area along the coast, so you probably wouldn't see storm surge very far inland, if at all, for areas along the northern coast of the Republic.
Yeah, the Dominican.
We said for the Bahamas and Puerto Rico, and even some parts of eastern Cuba, as the geography of that area is just not as mountainous as Hispaniola is.
Yeah, because basically it's basically like a sub-Saharan climate for Dominican Republic, and basically with the mountains and things like that, it's the coastline should be better off compared to the Bahamas, which is mostly just a small island chain, well, more of an elongated island chain, not really small, with a bunch of small islands that aren't really high up. So they hold a big risk, and for any of you that might think that's maybe why the reason why the storm might weaken over the time being. It's not. It's most likely going to be because the Greater Antilles, because although it looks like some of the Bahamian islands might be long and huge in size. Well, not really that huge, but the point is, it's just too flat to do much of anything. That same went down with the Leeward Islands, because there wasn't much to hinder the storm from hitting at full potential.
Yeah, and someone asked if they think, considering the fact that Irma's kept its intensity for so long, longer than strength forecast previously said, that it could maintain it on its way to all the way to Florida. Do one of you guys want to answer that?
Well,
I highly doubt that that's going to be the case, just because the storm is moving. Well, first of all, it's moving closer to actual big land masses now, so that's going to be one hindrance on the storm. So it's probably not going to be 185 miles per hour for strong. I'm not saying it won't be powerful, because it certainly will be, but it's not going to be as powerful as it is right now, which isn't that. Even a category 3 is still going to be huge. Nothing. Well, I mean, really, not too compared to this, but also another thing that could get into the way of this could be some very slight mid-level shear. Now, it's going to block out a very good chunk of that due to the way that it's natured, but there could be just a little bit that slips through and could knock off a few miles an hour off the storm. Another thing, probably the biggest thing that could start to weaken it, is its itself. Its sidewall replacement cycles that normally bring down the winds. As I said earlier, it brings down the wind speed, but it brings up the thunderstorm intensity, and it brings up the wind influence of the storm. So it's not really a win-win. In fact, it's just a lose-lose.
Yeah.
Orlando?
Huh?
Go ahead.
Oh, well, I was saying basically that it could be even worse, because the storm, I'm not ruling out yet that it will decrease from category 5 intensity once it nears Florida, as that still is on the table as every other option is. But when it comes to the eyewall replacement cycles as well, sometimes even though it might weaken, sometimes it might come stronger as well. And that's what's happened beforehand before Irma even reached the Leeward Islands is that they was going through multiple eye wall replacement cycles, and just 2 days ago it decided to blow up into a Category 4 and then go to Category 5 intensity. The only thing that could basically, in my eyes, that's going to be the biggest threat to hindering the storm right now would be the effects by the Greater Antilles and the mountainous terrain. That usually affects the storm's structure sometimes, and also its wind intensity, and it could mess it up depending how close it gets.
That's a very good point also.
Some people think this storm's going to get upgraded, by the way, on its current appearance.
I mean, the storm does look really good. It looks significantly better than it did several hours ago. But it's hard to see a storm getting stronger than this in the first place, and it's also starting an eye wall replacement cycle, which also puts a halt on intensification as well.
I wonder what its eye temperature is right now. That can sometimes be a factor. Yesterday it was in the 20s. At the moment it's 17. I would suggest that it's probably still 185.
Yeah, I would agree with 185.
And also, when a storm gradually draws ever further north, sometimes it can get a bit higher cloud tops when it's in the sort of the middle zone between 20 and say 30, 35 north.
Yeah.
I'll just point out the last recon that went through the storm, at flight level, it had the temperature in the eye of around 21 to 22 degrees Celsius.
Now that's us down slightly on yesterday.
Yeah, a little bit down.
Yeah, I expect it to remain its intensity by the NHC. What they've made out of the storm, which was like keeping it at intensity for a long time, and I see no problem with it. But when it starts going through eye wall replacement cycle, there is a possibility that they could drop it to 180, depending how weak it gets, and it's all a waiting game at the moment.
I mean,
really quickly, is it okay if I steal your screen share really quick?
Yeah, go ahead. Of course, I'll turn mine off.
So this is what I'm showing here. What I'm showing right now is something that we call the maximum potential intensity. What this is basically the theoretical limit to how strong the storm can get. And right now, the storm is pretty much at its theoretical limit. In fact, according to this, it's breaking it right now. I don't know the exact MPI value of the Dominican Republic, Haiti, Cuba. So if it gets even a few categories knocked off, it can easily just rebound right back up for after once it moves through the Florida Straits. By the way, I'm sorry if I'm stuttering a little bit. I'm just really just tired, and I don't really, I'm stuttering too much. I apologize, but even so, the storm could just be the same intensity it would be even if it does make landfall. That's on the Dominican Republic and Cuba. That's what I'm trying to say really right here.
Yeah, and as it gets into that area as well, it not only is the maximum potential intensity there higher, but at the same time, conditions are expected to be favorable there as well, with warmer sea surface temperatures, and as well as that, there's supposed to be deeper ocean heat content. And what ocean heat content is essentially it's how far deep the warm water goes that can support tropical cyclones, which is 79 degrees Fahrenheit, and the area that it will be going into around the Florida Straits, so that is as much as 80 meters deep, which is pretty far down in general, and that can make it so it can draw a lot of energy from the water.
Yeah, because hurricanes naturally.
Are you saying that it's 80 meters deep in terms of the 79 or 26 degrees Celsius threshold,
yes,
or just the actual? Okay, so that's a byproduct of the MPI because it factors in all of that. So that's what I just explained. Orlando, go ahead.
I don't remember anymore. It's all right.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, and I'll just pull up something that shows the ocean heat content at the mill as well.
My bad.
Of course, anything
Nice
from NOAA
ringtone.
stuff is anything from NOAA is going slower right now because of all the increased web traffic. But I will pull this up right now. Let's see. Let me zoom in a little bit and then I'll screen share it.
Yeah, we're just looking at the imagery of Irma whilst we wait for that, and I'm just
I pulled it up right
configuring-
now, so it's up.
Yep.
And you can see Irma's currently right around, excuse me for the horrible drawing, but it's right around there. And it's going to be moving into areas that have just as much, if not more, ocean heat content, especially as what Hank was talking about. The Florida Straits have a very high amount of ocean heat content. You can see right around the Bahamas, you see these deeper red colors, which the only other places you see them is in the Western Caribbean and the rest of the Caribbean Sea. So that is an area of very high ocean heat content. It can draw upon that energy to maintain strength or strengthen.
Yeah. So that's something. Hurricanes historically have moved into that area and have rapidly intensified. Case in point, Hurricane Andrew of 1992 moved right through the area of the northern Bahamas and went from barely even a tropical cyclone to a Category 5 hurricane within a matter of 3 days, mostly fueled by that high oceanic heat content, even though it was an El Nino year.
Yeah.
1935 Labor Day hurricane, that's another good example as it moved through the Florida Straits and really just blew up into this record-breaking Category 5.
Hank,
that made land.
the 6 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time position update is in from the NHC. A wind gust of 63 miles an hour was recently reported in San Juan, in Puerto Rico, of course, and an observing site on Vieques recently reported a sustained wind of 51 and a wind gust of 64. They keep the storm at 185 miles an hour, 914 millibars, 75 kilometers, 50 miles northeast of San Juan, 18.9 north, 65.6 west.
Yeah. Someone also, I know right before the break, someone asked if we can pull up the tropical storm / hurricane wind percentages. I'm pretty sure, Nathan, that you can find the exact percentages, and I'll pull up the graphic, which I have right here.
All right, sure. Well, I will read out only the hurricane wind probabilities. You're looking at the tropical storm wind probabilities on the screen, but for hurricane wind probabilities, Vieques only 7%, interestingly, 25% in San Juan. Puerto Plata 20%, Guantanamo Bay 3%, Havana 5%, Grand Turk 67% chance of hurricane conditions, Great Exuma 35, Andros 36, New Providence 20, Grand Bahama 32. Then we look at Florida, going from sort of the panhandle down the west coast and then up east. Panama City 1% chance, St. Mark's 3%, Tallahassee 2, Cedar Key 7, Tampa 12, Venice 14, Fort Myers 20, Naples 22, Key West 18, Marathon 31, Homestead 41, 41% chance of hurricane conditions in Homestead, Miami 40, Fort Lauderdale 41, 38% chance in West Palm Beach, 35 in Fort Pierce, 32 at Patrick Air Force Base, 32 at Cocoa Beach, 22 in Orlando, Daytona Beach 23, Gainesville 6, Jacksonville 10, Waycross, Georgia 3%, Kings Bay, Georgia 11, Savannah 7, Augusta 4, Charleston, South Carolina 7%, Georgetown 5, Myrtle Beach 4, Columbia 1, Florence 2, Wilmington, North Carolina 3, Surf City 2, New River 1%, Cherry Point 2%, Fayetteville 1%.
Yeah, and I would just like to note, as of the 5 p.m. update, there is an area on the onto Florida now that has 50+% chance of hurricane force winds.
And I think that's the 40 color, actually.
Oh, is that 40? Okay,
yeah.
I'm smart.
But the percentages are creeping up.
This updates every 6 hours along with the track of the storm as well. So all these graphics update every 6 hours.
Well, in the meantime, let's see if we can get some new infrared and maybe visible imagery on the storm, just the final ones. I'm going to try to get that on the screen here. That might take some time. Let's see what we've got. A close-up, the final close-up of the day of the visible imagery of Irma. Let's take a look. Wow. There's the eye swirling around again. Looks pretty much the same as it did yesterday. And that's not good.
Still looking pretty impressive. It hasn't lost any kind of structure or intensity. And of course that represents a lot of danger for the incoming islands. I mean, Turks and Caicos, the Bahamas, the Hispaniola as well. They are in completely in a very emergency situation, I must say, because this hurricane is historic.
Right. I don't know if anyone on the on here wants to show us some more screen stuff and maybe some more model ensembles and such, and people are asking for that at least.
I can show I got the visible floater, and I can also show some of the model spreads as well. So this is the floater I'm showing right now in particular. And you can see its trend to the west-northwest.
Yeah, another view.
It fortunately took, you can see midway through the run of the floater, it took a bit of a more northwest jog, and that kind of helped Puerto Rico avoid the worst of the impacts of the storm, and could potentially do so for Hispaniola as well. And I'll move over to the models now as well.
Before that, I just want to show the very latest imagery that we've got here. There was the last one, the last visible images. Again, another view, and this is the latest infrared image as of 5 minutes ago. As we tick over to 10 PM UTC, we're running uninterrupted for these 3 hours. We'll be here until midnight UTC. Another 2 hours to go with the live coverage here. And of course we'll be on with more recorded updates throughout tonight and into tomorrow. And there's now the model run.
Yeah, we showed these a little bit earlier, but essentially there is now a pretty tight consensus. None of these models show the storm going out to sea. None of them show it going into the Gulf of Mexico. There's still a couple that try to get close to a Cuban landfall. Uniquely, there's actually a better model consensus going 4 to 5 days out, which would be around here. Well, just about the same as it is at, I'll change the color, at 3 days out, which would be around here, if not slightly closer consensus. That's mostly because in this area right here, the models are showing when a northward turn would occur exactly. But regardless, a lot of the models right now will show the path is, at least up the Florida coast, the one's akin to Matthew's path. And it doesn't mean anything with the type of storm it is or anything, but that's just the path similarity. And that could mean very strong winds impacting the Miami area, the eastern Florida coast as well in general. And if you guys have any questions, just ask them in chat. I am looking at the chat as well. I try to answer as many questions as I can.
Indeed, and there are several of us here, some of us always in the background at various times, always gathering more resources and to bring you the latest news. I don't know if... yeah, go ahead.
Well, there is a question that says if Central Florida will feel the effect from this storm. Well, it depends, of course. Well, answering the question, it depends, of course, where and when the storm will move to the north, because the possibilities are that it could move over Florida once it turns to the north, or it could turn north before striking Florida and going directly to the Carolinas and maybe Georgia. But if Irma makes or not makes landfall, Florida will still be affected by the storm, and the storm surge will be it will be the main concern because it's a powerful hurricane. So I think practically the whole state of Florida, or well, at least this part of Florida will get affected by this storm seriously.
Hank?
Yeah. Also, keep
Hank
in mind
was
when you
speaking
see a
next,
track model forecast like this and you don't see any of the models put it straight over Central Florida, keep in mind the impacts aren't just located at the center of the storm. They can spread out sometimes hundreds of miles from the center of the storm. Someone did ask how big it is. If you were to, you see this map of Florida half with the mile spread. If you were to put it smack over Miami, it would cover most of the Florida peninsula at the storm reaching to the north, and parts of the outer bands would be reaching Cuba at the same time. So it is not a very small microscopic storm at all.
Yeah, remember that storms aren't just a point on a map. They're huge sprawling storms, and that you don't have to be in, there doesn't have to be a landfall for there to be significant impacts. What I was going to, do you mind if I still screen share first off? Trat, do you mind if I share screen share?
Yeah, sorry.
So what I was going to show is this quick loop of Irma moving. This is some Ghost 16 imagery from NASA, showing how beautiful yet terrifying Irma is moving through the Virgin Islands. It looks like it did dodge a landfall on whatever island this is, but that's not the point. We can see that there's actually some pretty interesting gravity waves coming out of the eye. What those are, they're basically just these little waves that come out from the center of the storm. Their purpose and the explanation of them, it's completely unknown. There's still research being done into that and how it can influence the storm's strength. But regardless, you can see here that how Puerto Rico is probably going to be spared of the eye wall, or the inner eye wall for that matter, and how the storm has just been progressing overall in this general northwest direction. You can see some little wobbles here and there. That's pretty common for hurricanes of this strength. Hurricanes don't move in straight lines. They tend to wobble, and what we call these is the technical name. They're called trochoidal oscillations, and these are very common in storms of Irma strength and down to probably any major hurricane for that matter. And these happen because this storm has to go under. Normally, when they rapidly intensify, as Irma did a while ago, they have to go undergo some sort of adjustment, and a way to do that is to fix out any inner core irregularities. And when that happens, the eye tends to wobble around a little bit, especially when there's an outer eye wall, and the inner eye wall is beginning to degrade. The actual eye can just move around a little bit within the eye wall, which is a pretty interesting phenomena. It's a little bit hard to explain. Matthew did that last year, moving up to Florida, if anyone wants an example. And one more thing, or actually two more things. You can see a beautiful stadium effect with this eye as it, and basically what that is that it gets small. The eye gets smaller as you move towards the bottom, almost kind of like an arena. Like you can,
it's kind of like an arena, sort of like, say, a circular football arena per se, or maybe one of those two of the amphitheaters put together that we see in ancient Greece, for example. And the last thing is you can see these little mesovortices within the eye of Irma, which I think is absolutely beautiful. The purpose of these is also relatively unknown, and purpose and the function of these are pretty unknown still. So just two little interesting features I wanted to point out, and just the whole visible imagery as a whole. So, Strat, if you want to go back to screen sharing, be my guest.
Doesn't
Yeah,
appear.
you managed to catch me at the right time because I just came back from my little break.
I didn't think you were here just then, but he is. Well,
I came back right as you guys
in the
did
meantime,
that.
you can see all the watches and warnings that are in effect. A good deal of the Bahamas are under hurricane warnings. The rest of them will probably be under hurricane warnings tonight, tomorrow, probably tomorrow. As should Cuba. I mean, eastern Cuba under tropical storm warnings, and I'm intrigued by that, and whether maybe they should be hurricane warnings. But I don't know.
I'm sorry, Nathan, repeat that. You kind of cut out for me a little bit.
About Cuba, how they've only issued tropical storm warnings along the east there. Do you think they should maybe be hurricane warnings?
Yes.
Well, I mean, the tropical storm force conditions do come before the hurricane conditions, and expecting the fact that the storm's wind radius, or the gale radius for that matter, is expected to widen, it makes sense, I guess, that they put out tropical storm warnings, which will probably be upgraded to hurricane warnings in due course.
Yeah,
but I guess
unless
now,
it moves way north of forecast, I suppose.
Which, well, north forecast, the tropical storm warnings would still be justified because they still would get tropical storm force winds, regardless of if it. I mean, if it recurs, we're not going to see anything, which is, I hate to say it, not going to happen at this stage. But even if they don't get hurricane force conditions, tropical storm force winds can still do a lot of damage.
There's some questions. Will there be an official Force 13 Discord? There already is, believe it or not. The way to get there, we don't have a public link at this point, but you can add my account on there, which is Fool13, and add extension 9094. I'm also on Skype under Fool13 as well, FOOL13. We're on both platforms at this point, and we do have chat rooms where we can discuss the latest on the storms at all points when we're not live. Of course, you can also find us on our social mediums as well, Facebook and Twitter, search Force13 all in text, and we upload updates whenever we're not live here as well. We're here till midnight UTC tonight, which is just less than 2 more hours, and then we'll have some more recorded updates throughout tonight. More questions then. Do you believe the National Hurricane Center has the path figured out, or do you think there's a chance for drastic change? Now, interesting how you say drastic. Hank.
Well, I mean, considering how tight-knit the model consensus is, it's pretty unlikely. In fact, actually, really quickly, I want to bring this up. I probably should have brought this up earlier, but it doesn't really matter. So, what I'm going to... Okay. So, what I'm going to... Strat, do you mind if I still screen share, by the way?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
You playing the piano at the same time?
Not me. I'm not entirely sure who that is.
Alright. Sounds fun anyway. Let's see if we can see the screen.
Okay, so can you see this?
We can indeed.
Okay, so actually, really quickly, let me just see if that works. Okay, so that works. Okay, please stop looping. Okay, so here's Irma right here. As you probably already guessed by this point.
Which at the moment is just obscured by our images. There we go. They're off the screen now.
Okay, so yeah, so here's Irma. No prizes for getting that. And this is going to be steered towards the west-northwest in response to this ridge that is currently over the open Atlantic. And in fact, I'm just going to go back and forth between two platforms here. I'm just going to use the GFS analysis for this to make it a lot easier for us. So let's just get to Let's see. I think, yeah, this is what I want. Yeah. So we have, so this is basically the whole steering situation with Irma. We have this big, actually, one second. Let me just take off that really quick. So we have this ridge over the Western Atlantic near Bermuda, and that is what's steering Irma towards the west-northwest.
And as far as
now,
ridges go, it looks pretty powerful.
It does. That's the Bermuda High, and it's supposed to be powerful around this time of year. And this is going to steer Irma towards north. Now, this is going to halt because we have this. So we have some sort of stuff going on over the United States. First of all, you can see this trough right here over the Ohio River Valley. That is going to kick out, and as Irma moves towards the west, you can see that another ridge becomes dominant over Texas. So that will spare Texas, fortunately, from impact from Irma, and we all know that's the last thing they need right now. So this ridge will still be in play. This trough, though, will be kicked out, and there'll be another little. You see this little orange nosing right here? That's another little ridge, and that will push out, and you can see that through this high pressure area. That will push out the ridge and actually expand it, and expand this in front of it, and actually break it to the point where it actually gets forced offshore, and this is what we call an anticyclonic wave break. So this will be pushed off. These three ridges will become dominant. Just to give you some sort of perspective right here, these three ridges will become dominant as they push Irma in this general direction over time. Now, also do me a quick favor and ignore these pressures on that GFS is showing for Irma. And it keeps moving north because everything just kind of stops a little bit.
But Hank, having already seen what this storm has done, you think this could go below 900 millibars as it deepens and widens?
I mean, it's possible, but if it's going to be a Category 4, it's going to be very difficult for it to actually get below 900, even what it is right now.
And I just want to bring in this question, which might tie in with what you're going to show next, and whether storm surge could be a potential threat to North Carolina beaches.
Well, storm surge is a threat to any of the beaches along the southeast United States due to the trajectory of the storm. Because if you have a storm that is moving up like this, then you have, water being pushed all along the shore right here. And pretty much this entire stretch of coastline is probably going to get some sort of storm surge. Very reminiscent, potentially, to Matthew of last year. But took a track kind of like this, except moving over South Carolina briefly. This one is probably going to move more like this, move right into the shore instead of staying just offshore, the southeast. So that's the difference here. And now going back to this whole synopsis thing, the ridge over the Bermuda High is going to be eroded a little bit by Jose, which will actually force it into the southeast United States, according to this model. And here it's going to kick out into the North Atlantic. This ridge over here is also being eroded by Irma, and the ridge over Texas just stays stationary pretty much, and Irma just moves into the Ohio Valley pretty much. You also note how Jose kind of takes an eastward turn a little bit towards the end of the run. That is due to which is going to be pulling it pretty much, which could actually pull it out to sea. But if not, this ridge that was initially pulling Irma into the United States, it could also pull on Jose, but also keep in mind this is 144 hours out, that's 6 days, so it's a little bit far out for my liking. So we're not going to go into full details about Jose because, one, that's not the main topic, and two, it's just too far out. And now that I'm looking at it, let's just go ahead and just take a quick look at it. Katia, this thing right here is a hurricane now. Miracle, it feels like. Going to be pushed to the southwest, pretty much into Veracruz, because of that ridge that I mentioned over Texas. It's just going to stay. It's just going to stay put, and it's going to force it into Mexico. and it won't be able to move north into Texas and give them the last thing they need right now, which is more rainfall. So that's some good news for Texas, not very good news for Mexico, fortunately. Excuse me. And could be some more inclement weather for them, because my throat's starting to hurt. But
yeah,
if Katia is very likely not to influence Irma at all. If we zoom out a little bit, we can see how far apart these two storms are. And if Irma is going to be moving to this position, people would think that Katia is just going to stall and stay in this general area.
You can already see the barrier there, the physical barrier that's going to prevent Irma from entering the Gulf.
Yeah, and that's the leading edge of this trough that is shearing Katia, but that doesn't seem to be impacting it right now. This boundary right here, and that is going to be staying put. I don't know why it zoomed in there, but that's going to be staying put as this moves on out, and this moves in behind it, and be pushing this up to the north. And this will just be pushed southwest into Mexico due to the ridge being over Texas, forcing it southwest.
Given that that's already in place, do you think Irma may still turn earlier than what is currently being predicted?
Easily could. I mean, it wouldn't really surprise me to see a track somewhat kind of like this and right up the East Coast, which is not a very good scenario either.
No.
It all depends really on the timing of, let me just back up a little bit. It really just depends on the timing of when the trough kicks out, because the amplified trough right here, and it wouldn't be very likely for it to kind of an Irene or Gloria type track if this ridge was amplified this much, because with Gloria and Irene, this ridge was located right over this area, and that is what brought it up the East Coast. Excuse me. For Irma, it's going to be over here, according to the models, and that will mean it will keep moving west and have other factors influences, such as this ridge and this ridge, that will both push it north up into the southeastern United States. I hope that explanation made sense. Also, so
yeah.
Okay.
Is it okay if I take over screen share because someone is asking a question about Jose?
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead.
All right, I'll take it over. They're asking. They said it's a bit soon, but do you guys what do we think about Jose's potential track and its impacts to St. Kitts and the northern Leeward Islands?
Right.
So I'll pull up that right now. I'll show the forecast track.
Whilst we wait for that, you can see the latest image here of Irma, and the cloud top's still very strong in the western and northwestern side, and the southwestern side is getting pretty close. It's sort of affecting the northeastern tip of Puerto Rico right now, so who knows what the wind speeds are there. The National Hurricane Center will no doubt let us know at the end of the hour. Over to Strat.
Yeah, so this is the track of Jose, and the places that I circled are the places that Irma have already directly impacted the harshest 3 or 4 Category 5 landfalls as peak strength. And you can see already that the cone, even at 3 days, puts some of the little islands right here into the cone of uncertainty, and does even more so in 5 days. So even a track shift a little bit to the south or west can actually put these islands back in harm's way once again. And that would be absolutely devastating considering they just got hit by a Category 5 hurricane, to be hit by Jose, which is forecasted to be near its peak strength of a major hurricane at that same time period where it would be getting close to those islands. There are factors that could prevent it from moving completely towards that way, but it is not out of the question at all. And another question I've been seeing is like whether or not Irma will get to 190 miles an hour or strengthen more and stuff. That's not going to happen at the moment, and I have seen people acting giddy and happy about such prospects, and I will say that is absolutely despicable. And as a stream mod, if I see anything like that in this chat, I can assure you there's going to be an instant ban from the stream chat.
Well, that's that. In the meantime, I've received a few images of, I'm not sure where, but on one of the islands, which look very devastating indeed. The sort of things you'd expect when a Category 4 or 5 storm goes through the area. Not sure whether we'll be able to show anything whilst we're on the air, but I can tell you that things are pretty bad along many of those islands. I don't know exactly which one's the worst, but Barbuda, I can assure you, is pretty bad. There is at least one fatality there, and it was said by Antigua and Barbuda's Prime Minister that there is pretty much 100% total damage and destruction on that particular island. The eye also passed over St. Martin and the British Virgin Islands, and perhaps part of the US Virgin Islands would have received Category 5 winds as well. So that's very serious. Yeah?
Could you reiterate, I don't really know the specifics, but are there any reported deaths on any of those islands?
At least one on Barbuda and possibly some others elsewhere, which I'm not yet able to confirm, but at least one at present.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Someone's asking if there are chances to spawn tornadoes with the storm. Nathan or Hank, if you guys want to answer this.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, tornadoes being spawned by hurricanes is almost always confined to the northeastern quadrant of the storm, which for now is probably going to be staying offshore for the greater Antilles of the United States. Bahamas is a different story. Typically, it's being generated by hurricanes happen when they start hitting land, not really when they're over the ocean. And the Bahamas really are pretty small islands, and they're pretty low in elevation, so they don't really have that much impact on hurricanes. And compared to say what Hispaniola would do, because Hispaniola is quite mountainous. But because if a storm hits, like for example, Harvey produced a bunch of tornadoes once it started to hit Texas to the northeast of it. That's because of it's complicated, and I don't want to get into it, but it's just because of the way that the storm produces vorticity within itself. And once that starts hitting land, there's friction that comes into place, and some of it starts to rotate, and you get a tornado. That's the best way I can simplify it for you.
Yeah, and do we want to talk about the eyewall replacement cycle as well, just because I have the radar up and you could see the starts of the effects with it?
Sure. So right now you can see pretty well using the radar imagery that Shret is currently showing you, that it appears that there are two eye walls, and you would be correct, because you have the inner eye wall, which is surrounding the actual eye, and there's another little band that surrounds that is the secondary eye wall. And this is the beginning of what we call an eye wall replacement cycle. And for those of you who are unaware of what an eye wall replacement cycle is, so they start off when a storm starts to get really strong. Storms of Category 2 strength or higher, and Irma definitely qualifies for that. They normally, once that happens, they need to undergo some sort of adjustment within their core, and one way to do that is through an eye wall replacement cycle. And what happens is that you have your eye wall, your actual inner eye wall that surrounds the actual eye, and that's what's dominant. But then eventually you get these really strong bands that surround the eye wall, and sometimes, in fact, more often than not, they tend to all coalesce to form one big, basically, ring around the the inner eye wall. So that's what Strat is marking in blue, and that is the outer eye wall, and what's in pink is the inner eye wall. And what the outer eye wall does, it functions as an eye wall as the bands coalesce.
it starts to choke off the inner eye wall because it is provided with less energy from the storm itself, and that eventually starts to weaken and eventually disintegrate. The outer eye wall then becomes dominant, and then normally you have a new eye, which is normally bigger than it. Now, during the eye wall placement cycle, it is normal for storms to weaken in terms of winds. But that's not, and people might think that's a good thing. It's not, because at the same time, the thunderstorms associated with the storm get stronger, they get taller, and that means heavier rain, and we could have stronger wind gusts and stuff. But what it also does is it increases the influence of the gale. So that means islands that were originally outside of the gale force winds could be inside of it in a placement cycle. And so that means it's not always a good thing. In fact, more often than not, it's a bad thing. So yes, the winds weaken, but the influence and the intensity of the thunderstorms go up.
Yeah,
basically a crash course of what an eye wall placement cycle is.
Yeah, and there's a couple more questions. Someone asked if there's a possibility that makes a Category 5 landfall in Florida. That doesn't seem super likely at the moment. And someone also asked if Katia can make a landfall in the United States. That is out of the question. That isn't going to happen. And
like I explained earlier, that bridge that should come down over Texas is going to block it and push it southwest into the Veracruz area.
Yeah,
and on the stream,
history.
You're on the stream. You're able to see the latest imagery of the visible, just as it's getting dark over there over Irma right now.
Yeah, and Hanks, you know more about tropical history than me. So someone asked, "Is this the strongest storm to hit Miami if it were to hit it?"
Well, no, because
you have
Hurricane Andrew of 1992 was 165 miles an hour once it made landfall in Homestead, not directly at downtown Miami, but in the Miami-Dade area. That was the strongest storm to ever make landfall in Miami.
Outrageous question to be asking right now.
And someone also asked if the current track where landfall will happen can change, or if there's anything else that can happen with it. The answer, especially this far out, is for sure yes. The track forecast can change and will probably change as well. I'll look for another question.
We've had changes just in the past 6 hours. The track was, most of the models were offshore Florida. Now most of them are moving back onshore Florida. So that shows you right there that it's variable, especially this far out. Once we get a day out, then it's pretty tight knit where it's going to go. With our current technological abilities, we would have the abilities we have right, say a day out from landfall. We would have those abilities, say like a couple hours out. So our technology over hurricane forecasting and analysis has definitely improved over the years, and that's something that is helping us a lot with our knowledge of these phenomena and how to prepare.
And someone else asked if Irma will become an annular hurricane.
It already
is. It was
is.
looking like it could have 2 days ago, but it is not annular and does not look like it will become one at the moment.
It has lost its annular characteristics, and if this eye wall placement cycle is complete, then it could try to regain it. But then I think land interaction potentially with Hispaniola would negate that. And annularity really is something that you probably shouldn't pay too much attention to, because it's already a strong enough storm in its own right. And really, the fact of it's annular or not doesn't really matter, because it's still a Category 4, Category 5 hurricane that's going to be bearing down on you, and that's still a huge deal, regardless of how it looks.
And someone else asked if they think Katia can make a major hurricane landfall. You guys can answer that.
Well, I think Katia.
Possible.
Yes,
depends on if it could easily just sit over the same area and cause some upwelling, and I think that's probably going to happen. So I don't think it's going to be a major. I don't really even think it's going to be a Category 2. I don't even know what the NHC says. They probably do say Category 2, so I'm wrong. So yeah, I heard Caesar trying to talk. So if you want to talk, go ahead. Sorry if I'm talking over.
Well, as I think for now, it is a possibility, but of course, it depends how good the conditions can get over the Bay of Campeche. It is a really small system, so it has well, it could easily intensify further, but it depends actually a lot if it has land interaction as well, and the conditions, as I said before, like wind shear or dryer. Of course, there's no dry air, but I mean,
Yeah.
the possibility is there. The models actually are predicting Category 3, also Category 4 landfall, something that for me personally is outrageous for now. I will be surprised if Katia intensifies more than it is right now.
Yeah,
Actually, now
the
that you
current rain forecast from the Hurricane Center says 80 knots, so that would still be a Category 1.
yeah, so and now that actually
And someone also asked if Irma will hit Washington, D.C.
first let's take a look at the
Oh no.
sorry.
No.
Hank,
No.
we lost your signal briefly, so go ahead.
Okay, so I'm just doing this just to give the viewers an idea of potential scenarios that could happen. Pay attention more to the track and not to the intensity, because some of the models, especially some of the later ones you'll see, have been quite bullish on the intensity. So first of all, let's start with the GFS model, the American model, and that shows Irma. This is the one I showed you earlier with the synopsis. It shows Katia making a strong tropical storm landfall, and it shows Irma just missing Florida by the looks of it, and then hitting along the Georgia-South Carolina border as probably a Category 3-4 hurricane in this model, and showing Jose kind of meandering out in the open ocean. So that's the GFS solution. The European solution, the ECMWF, is showing that Irma could move a little bit closer to Cuba than the other models are showing in Mexico, and showing Irma curves later than the GFS, moving it right into pretty much the Miami-Dade area, kind of like a Hurricane King scenario. In the landfall near Savannah as probably a Category 3 hurricane. It also shows Jose just meandering out in the open ocean, not moving closer to the Leeward Islands, but not over it. But that honestly doesn't matter because they've already had such a significant storm. CMC model, the track model, shows that my connection isn't the best, so the hours are going to take a little bit more time to load than usual, and plus there's a lot of traffic on this site considering the actual activity right now. But it's actually showing Katia dissipate before landfall in Mexico. Shows Irma move it's pretty similar to the European solution. In fact, pretty much identical except for the last part. It actually starts moving more northeast. It's North Carolina, and then kind of just moves up the East Coast and then just fizzles out kind of. But then Jose gets actually kind of weak. Well, I mean, doesn't show it very strong on this model, which it's unrealistically weak, I think, in this model run. It shows it getting pretty close to the Lesser Antilles. And the NavGen model, which I'm going to go back a run for, is showing really quickly. Is showing that Irma. It shows it pretty weak, but it tends to show storms weak. So ignore that. It shows Katia moving inland probably as a tropical storm. It shows Irma curving north a little bit later than the European and Canadian model with Canadian CMC. Moving it right up the Florida Peninsula, never emerging back over water after Florida landfall and just dissipating over the Ohio Valley. And also moves Jose, it moves it in a pretty similar path to Irma once it gets towards the longitude of both Leeward Islands, a bit farther north, and then curves it north probably due to Irma's influence itself and another ridge over the open Atlantic.
Yeah, and there's some more questions. Someone asked if Irma is the most powerful hurricane in years. It is. And Someone asked, what is an annular hurricane, and what are the best and worst case scenarios for Florida with this storm?
An annular hurricane, you said?
Yes.
So it's just a different type of hurricane that's more resistant to outside, outside inhibitors to development, and kind of has a typical donut shape with a huge eye and very little spiral bands. It's basically just a brief scenario of the annularity. As far as it impacts to Florida, if it's annular, it probably won't have any impacts at all if it's annular or not, because it just doesn't really matter. Anyways, back to the models really quick. HWRF to the track, not the intensity, showing Irma move through the Bahamas and then curving north a little bit, about similar to the GFS, staying just offshore Florida, but again, remember, it doesn't have to make landfall to cause significant impacts. And then we'll probably end up making it have landfall in South Carolina. The model just doesn't go out that far. The last model I'm going to show you is the HMON, which has been by far the most bullish model, all 6 that I'm showing you right now. And it's unrealistic, so please don't pay attention to the actual air pressure. Moves it farther north than the other models, right through the Bahamas. And then moves it due west. Is it kind of close to Cuba, and then barely hits near, I guess, Fort Lauderdale, and then moves right up, and then after that takes a Matthew path right up the Florida coast, and then hits Georgia as a category, actually only category 1 hurricane with a very deep pressure. So those are all the model solutions right now, and I'm gonna stop talking because my throat hurts, and other people need to have a chance.
Yeah, I also just want to point out there is a new recon plane heading into Irma, and Hank, you have a lot of echo right now.
We're now joined by Isaac. That's Isaac, by the way.
I was sharing I just shared an image in the chat of Irma, the sun going down in it. The newest image I think is out already, so I'm gonna go ahead and post that soon. But the other image I sent, basically the last few, sun rays on Irma before it fully goes down. So.
Yes, we're trying to persevere with 2 people being there at the same time with the audio, but never mind. But we're looking at the latest imagery right now of Irma continuing to move towards what appears to be the west-northwest still, and is still affecting the northern coast of Puerto Rico as a significant hurricane. Of course, the strongest winds won't be over the northern coast of Puerto Rico right now, but the National Hurricane Center will be coming out with another position update at the top of the hour in around 20 minutes time. If you've got any questions or comments for us whilst on the air, send us a message. Start your message with 413, it will light up for me, and that'll be very nice indeed. But there's the latest map showing where all the warnings and watches are right now. Interesting, as I said earlier, to note that tropical storm warnings are in effect for the coast of Cuba, and they're not hurricane warnings at this point, but that may be an upgrade to come later on tomorrow. Also, those hurricane watches that are already in effect may well become warnings sometime tomorrow, and hurricane watches may start to come into effect for part of Florida and the rest of Cuba maybe later on, depending on where exactly the storm goes, and obviously we're waiting to find out, as everyone else is at this moment in time. Who have we still got with us? Is Cesar still on?
Yes, I'm still here, Nathan.
Hi. Is there anything you'd
Hello.
like to add?
About what? Irma, Katia, Jose, the 3 ones?
There's 3 storms right now. It's outrageous, isn't it?
Well, just to reminder,
yeah, we'll have to stop that echo, I'm afraid to say. I don't know whose it is right now, but I don't know. Has it gone?
Well,
okay.
yes, I think it's gone. All right. Just a reminder of the latest track that NHC has posted. That well now the eastern part of Cuba has now tropical storm warnings.
Yep.
In my opinion, there should be a hurricane warning because the storm will pass pretty close to the island, or well, to the country. And of course they will feel tropical storm conditions, but hurricane conditions are pretty possible as well because the storm will stay pretty intense. And so, well, I just want to know, well, not to know, I just hope that people in that is taking cover or all the precautions, preparing to the arrival of the storm in the next 30 hours, possibly. And now watching again the latest frames of Irma, you can see the eye completely circular and the storm pretty organized. Practically, there's nothing that is impeding the storm to keep maintaining this status. It is now the first storm ever in the Atlantic to maintain 180 miles per hour or above in a day. The last one was Allen
Yeah.
of 1980.
That's if it maintains its
maintain it.
intensity through the post-analysis. It'd be interesting to see what they come up with, because I don't support that it's still 185 at this point, considering the recon never had those wins any time recently, but it's still extremely strong, at least 175, and you know, it's
right.
well beyond the threshold of category 5 intensity, and it continues. And it is going with what the National Hurricane Center predicted pretty much when it first became a category 5, or when it first became 185 miles an hour, is that it's still a category 5 now, 2 days later, or however long later it's been. It's getting on for 2 days, and it would appear that weakening is not yet occurring.
That's right, and it's evident actually. There's nothing actually that shows any sign of weakening so far. And of course, the forecast says it will slight weaken as it travels to the west northwest, approaching Turks and Caicos Islands and the Bahamas, possibly weakening to a Category 4 hurricane before striking Florida or Cuba. Who knows? But still, it will be a pretty powerful storm. Of course, some media are actually comparing Irma to Andrew, but I think there's too soon yet to compare storms. Irma hasn't caused anything yet to Florida. It's pretty far.
I don't think it can be compared to Andrew.
Yeah, sorry for interrupting. There's just some news. The Princess Juliana Airport in St. Martin has been reported to have been destroyed by Hurricane Irma.
Now that, I believe, is the airport that has the extremely low, right next to the beach runway. The one where...
Yeah, looking at a map, that's definitely for sure where it is.
Gee. And the geography of the island means that that location right in the middle of the island is where that airport is planted, and there's only room for the road and the beach beside the runway. And well,
yeah,
that island's going to be in real trouble for weeks.
Yeah, I can screen share and show you guys the map of where that airport is.
Isaac.
Oh.
Yeah, go ahead, man.
Yeah, and another thing of note, another thing of note is that this is the first time since 2010 that we've had 3 simultaneous hurricanes active at the same time, and we have obviously we have Hurricane Jose, Irma, and we also now have Hurricane Katia, I believe it is, or however you say it. And the last time that happened was in 2010 when we had Igor, Julia, and Carl, And before that, the last time we had 3 or more hurricanes active at the same time was in 1998 when we had Hurricane George's, Ivan, Carl, and Gene active at the same time on September 26th, 1998. So it's quite a rare sight to see, and just wanted to point that out and just try to keep going.
Yeah, if you want to pull up my screenshot that I have up, I'm just showing a map of the area. The airport is right on the shore, and it is destroyed. That's the if I'm not mistaken, I'm assuming that's the only airport on the island.
I think so. I'm just
Is it
looking
not?
at a
Okay.
picture as well, and it's not the airport's completely destroyed, but the roof has been completely almost sheared off, and it's been heavily damaged. I don't know what other parts of the airport look like, but the main terminal building is extremely badly damaged, and I wonder whether the roof is sagging a little bit on the picture as well, and whether it's coming off, or whether that's just the shape of the terminal. But certainly heavy damage there.
Yeah, can you do you have that picture to show?
I'm not sure whether we're able to show it here, but I don't know whether you could find it elsewhere, but that's what I'm seeing anyway.
Yeah, but in the meanwhile, this is the general area. The big thing is Antigua and Barbuda still, we haven't, the only reports we have really is that someone's confirmed dead on Barbuda, and a large majority of the buildings in Barbuda are also destroyed. We won't really be able to get a full scope of the damage there for at least another day or two, because no planes or anything can be flown into the area yet, because it is still being impacted by the outer bands of the storm. And in the meanwhile, I'm going to see if I can find any images of the airport to show.
So there we are right now, coming up to 10 to 11 p.m. UTC, and the next update from the position update from the National Hurricane Center will be coming up soon. Do we have Orlando right now?
Yes, I'm here.
What's the latest from you there on the storm?
Well, for what I've been viewing so far, it's not looking too good for anybody at the moment. Hurricane watches still remain for most of the area, and tropical storm conditions are still in effect for many portions around Hurricane Irma at the moment, and some might even experience hurricane force winds or gusts. And all that together just puts it into a dangerous situation, unfortunately. And it seems as though that the only good thing about this storm, which is not really good at all, is the fact that it's going under an eyewall replacement cycle, which can be basically a sort of Russian roulette almost, if it's going to basically weaken itself or it's going to use it to strengthen itself even further, because that sometimes also happens, but we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
Mm. And I, just for you guys who don't know right now, I know Irma is the main focus right now, and there's an echo again, but we have other storms active in Atlantic as well. Like I said, we have Jose, which has 75-mile-an-hour winds and a pressure of 994 millibars at 16 miles an hour. And models are thinking that'll mainly stay out to sea, although it might cause some effects to the northern leewards, which will not be a really good thing, obviously, with Irma going on there. And we also have Hurricane Katia or Katia, I believe. So I'm not too certain how you.
I've always called it Katia.
Yeah, this has a 4 p.m. advisory. Has moving southeast at 3 miles an hour. Its minimum pressure is 992, maximum sustained winds of 75 miles per hour, and is expected to just kind of meander around the Bay of Campeche and move south and possibly hit Mexico as a hurricane as well. So that needs to be wants to, but obviously the main focus is Irma right now.
Yeah, if you still have my screen share, I actually have some pictures of the damages caused at that airport by Hurricane Irma. If you just want to switch over to this, I have about 4 or 5 pictures right now, and all of them don't look too good at all. This is one of them right here. During the midst of the hurricane, you can just see. You can't even see because of how bad it's raining, but all you can see is just the torrential winds. It looks like a trunk got flown open as well in that car right there. And then
I think that's the least of the issues.
Yeah, and then this is another picture right here with big chunks of the roofs of the terminal just, you know, thrown down onto the ground by the hurricane. Lots of dirt and stuff thrown around as well because it's supposed to be pavement area, and you can see all the dirt and mud and stuff left around by debris and whatnot. And then here are a few more images. You see whole like trailers and stuff and sections of boardways to planes like shattered down. And then the one on the top right's an actual picture of inside the airport. You see parts of tiling on the floors and stuff are even broken as well. Lights have fallen down from the ceiling, and there's overall been a lot of damage to the area.
Yeah, shocking. And this sort of damage will have been repeated across many of those islands as we wait a few more minutes for the next National Hurricane Center update at this time. Won't take long, will be just a few minutes. We're staying here with uninterrupted coverage until the end of the next hour, so things might go a little bit slowly for us here. But if you've got any questions for us to keep us on our toes and such, you can send them in.
If you want to answer this, someone asked how this is comparable to Andrew in size and stuff like that.
I don't think it should be compared to Andrew.
Well, I don't think they're talking about damage and stuff as much as the size of the storm.
It's a bit larger than Andrew.
Yeah, Andrew is a very small system.
Larger, the eye's probably larger, more intense as well. They did have the infrared satellite imagery back then, and you can tell from the imagery today that it's stronger easily. And obviously it's got more of a future ahead of it too, and it won't go into the Gulf, of course, but potential impacts for Florida probably won't be of Category 5 intensity, but you never know. But by the looks of things, the track forecast keeps sort of changing and molding into more of a Matthew ending, doesn't it?
Yeah. Someone also asked in chat, Justin Demon asked, what caused Irma to rapidly intensify from a Category 3 hurricane to 185 miles an hour in about a day or so?
Perfect conditions, and the storm taking advantage of those perfect conditions are very high sea surface temperatures, 28, 29 Celsius, no wind shear, no dry air, annular characteristics, all helped Irma to do this whilst not becoming annular completely. That's probably the thing that made it even stronger, perhaps. And whilst the pressure's still not quite as low as you'd expect for a storm of this intensity, probably due to the annularity, which is sort of fading away a little bit, but it's probably also what is helping to keep it strong for longer.
Yeah, and someone asked, what are the odds of it being a Category 4 as it passes of Florida? Right now, according to the National Hurricane Center, it is supposed to remain a Category 4 throughout all of the next 5 days. The current forecast track with their intensity guidance says over Miami-Dade County it will be a Category 4 hurricane.
We'll put it this way: the National Hurricane Center thinks that there's a 41% chance of this storm giving Fort Lauderdale and Homestead hurricane force winds. That's of Category 1 intensity, so the chances for Category 4 intensity winds are much less. because even if the storm is a Category 4 just offshore, you won't get Category 4 force winds on land. But you know, these are all far, far, far into the realms of speculation, and unfortunately, as I've said it before, for Florida, you're in a position where the landmass isn't very wide, so the storms can make can keep people guessing for a very long time, and almost always do.
Yeah, and the 7 p.m. update advisory's out. I will just show that quickly as well.
No change?
No, same strength, same pressure. Passing just north of Puerto Rico. And because we were talking about the strength, I will just show the strength forecast as well right at the moment. It shows it at 5 days being 135 knots now, which is 150 miles an hour. Oh wait, no, I'm looking at the wrong day. I'm sorry, that's 3 days out.
Yeah, it's the same forecast advisory that was issued earlier, of course.
Yeah, so it shows 140 to 145 miles an hour at 4 days, and 120 out at 5 days. If I'm not mistaken, I was checking earlier, there is a recon that's heading into the storm. I'll check and see if that's gotten there at all.
And Strat, I just posted an image of the last visible image of Irma, really eerie. You can see the eye just fading from the visible view, and I just posted that on there. If I want to show that for a few.
Yeah, I will show that in a second. Here's the refresh of the recon. It'll probably be 30 minutes or so before we actually get our first eye pass or anything, and
Yeah.
I will show this image right here. This is the last image of the daylight hours on visible of Irma. Probably the last.
Ghostly.
The eye fading to black there.
Really
just north
eerie.
of Puerto Rico too. I know I have a friend that lives in northwest Puerto Rico, so I've been keeping him informed all day. Someone asked us. Sorry for interrupting. You can go first.
Oh, and if you're wondering about recon, there is another recon, like you said, going into Irma, lower level reconnaissance mission that's en route. And then there's another mission that finished too that only went through one pass, 2 passes it looks like, and nothing really much going on besides that one lower level reconnaissance mission going on. And you can go ahead, Strat.
There's 2 questions. I'll answer them in order. Someone asked, they said this is the last question. Is it possible for us to link this at all to climate change? And you guys can answer this first.
I'm not talking about that.
Personally, I think individual storms cannot be linked to anything.
Yeah, they can't. Me personally, it's just it can't. Yeah, like Nathan said, it can't be linked to anything. It's just it all depends on its conditions that it has, and it really doesn't matter on anything else besides its conditions that it's under.
And the rest of that will probably be in debate at some point in the future, not whilst we're streaming though. I've also got a question on Facebook which I want to read out as well about the definition of stage 9, which is what we sometimes band about from the CDPS scale, which is Devon's territory. He invented the CDPS scale, the Cyclone Destruction Potential Scale is its full name, and it is a 10-point scale, and Irma is still a stage 9 on that 10-point scale. And that means that catastrophic damage will occur from this storm and already has occurred from the storm. The way you define the stages is by using several different criteria, including the wind speed, the wind field size, and its forward motion speed. And with all of those factored in, it is one of the highest storms in the Atlantic to rank on the CDPS scale, which I think historic records for that only go back to the 80s or something like that. Devon will fill you in all of those specifics if he pops onto the stream, or I think you can also, I'm not sure what his details are if you want to speak to him as well, but he's around. But if you have any more inquiries about that, do send us a message on Facebook, because Devon, I know, does monitor that personally, and he may respond to you.
Yeah.
Someone also asked in chat what our personal models are. I don't know about them. I don't really have a personal favorite because models aren't always accurate in general. Although the H-Warf is not that bad. I like that model in general, just for pathing. What do you guys think?
Yeah,
Well,
it's a big
in
model. It just depends.
yeah, practically depends. I don't models actually. I don't have any preference or any models. I just took the models as a guidance of what was gonna happen in the next days, but everything changes, and of course, the models sometimes can confuse the people as well. So,
If we go by
mm,
anything, we go by what's best at the time, and all I can tell you at the moment is that during 2016 into the early months of 2017 in the Southern Hemisphere, the HWRF was the best model. It isn't at the moment. The best model for Harvey, when we go back to Harvey, and the report that I'm currently compiling on Harvey should be finished in the next 24 hours, notwithstanding Irma, will show you that the best model during Harvey was actually the CTCX model, which is a new experimental model. I think it was for the US Navy. It was Devon who told me what it was, but an experimental model that was used was the best model for Harvey overall strength and intensity, and it also said that Irma would become a Category 5. I'm not sure what it currently says. Briefly, I want to bring us to the latest imagery, infrared, showing you the northwestern eye wall flaring up again, though I have to say the eye temperature is is lower than it was earlier. So it's sort of evened out, leveled out there, and it's probably still the same intensity.
Yeah, it's most likely because the eye wall replacement cycle as well might have something to do with it.
Yeah, I actually have the radar up. It shows the outer eye wall starting to close in on the inner eye wall. If you want to show that at all for my screen share. Basically, I'll show it a little bit, just the continuous motion. You can see the outer eye wall, which is the outer heavier bands starting to move in and contract around the main eye wall. And if I stop it in motion,
Sounds like we lost Strat at that point. I'm not sure whether
oh
that's...
wait, I'm using push to talk. I'm silly.
Yes. Press
Basically,
the buttons correctly.
Yeah, basically, from the first frame to the last frame, you can see the outer eye wall starting to contract towards the main eye wall, and that will eventually choke it out and create a new eye wall. You can actually start to see right here at the eastern quadrant, southeast quadrant, there's actually the eye wall starting to open up a little bit there.
So I'm just looking at the CTCX model at the moment, the one that I said was best with Harvey, and it said 12 hours ago that it would stay at 185 miles an hour for 12 hours. Well, that's a check mark there. And then it would begin to slowly weaken but remain a Category 5 until, where are we, another 24 hours from now, and then gradual weakening until day 5, when I'm guessing it impacts Florida. No, it doesn't. Where does it impact? Day 5, it impacts South Carolina with winds of 110 miles an hour, and then moves inland. So that's pretty interesting. That's the best model so far. For Harvey it was, but for Irma it says this. And that it will move over Andros Island as a Category 4, and move over Grand Bahama on the western tip as a Category 4, similar to Harvey. No, Matthew, sorry. And then into South Carolina as a 110 mile an hour Category 2. That's what it is saying. Marked, I think, by the blue line on Strat's image here.
Yeah, it's one of the blue lines. You can see the outline. I'll color it. I'll circle.
It's the darker blue line, I believe.
Yeah,
they've got the same color.
It's this one right here. if you read the coloring out.
Correct.
It's that one right there. That's where you can see it shows the South Carolina landfall right there before moving inland.
So that's statistically the best model for the last storm. Using it for this storm, that's what it says right now, and that would suggest a better case scenario for Florida. But at the moment, it's somewhat on the edge of the consensus.
And honestly, the most notable thing for me is it actually moves the storm a lot faster. You see, most of the models have it at 4 days.
Yes.
At 4 days around this area here, it has it up here, and while 5 days is
well inland.
Well, 5 days is around here-ish. It's already got it, like you said, well inland around this area. And not only that, it's kind of a fringe on the track as well. It brings it right over the center of the Bahamas, and and up in the very western Atlantic towards South Carolina, rather than riding the coast of Florida in a Matthew-like scenario.
Again, we're looking at the infrared imagery at this point. I don't know whether Cesar or Marcel would like to say anything at this point.
Sorry, Nathan. Can you repeat the last thing you said?
I don't know if you just wanted to say anything at this point on the stream, Cesar.
Well, the thing I can say about, well, at this stage about Irma is, well, first of all, that of course a lot of people still asking how strong Irma could strike Florida, or even if Florida could get struck by Irma. The answer of that is we don't know yet. An estimate, well, in the forecast displayed by the NHC says that 145 150 miles per hour landfall could occur, but the possibility is there that Irma could make landfall in the Carolinas without making landfall in Florida. So it could be a weaker storm, but still pretty intense to cause massive destruction. So practically, there's no way or point to say that that like we are safe or whatever, because the hurricane will cause a lot of destruction. It will affect the Florida anyways. It will affect many other states in the country. Talking about the United States, of course. So just people must take all the precautions and still keep the eye on this storm. And now moving to Katia, it surprised me, to be honest, that it has intensified to a hurricane pretty quickly. But the principal concern is that this hurricane is moving so slowly, and it is intensifying pretty fast, or well, at least it has intensified pretty quickly in the last hours. So if Katia keeps intensifying like this, with that movement pretty low to the south and then to the southwest, it has a lot of potential to be a significant storm as well to Mexico. Something that people in the country should, of course, watch pretty close. Practically, we may see double landfall on between Friday and Saturday, talking about Irma and Katia. So it will be pretty interesting to see, actually. And well, what about Jose? This hurricane I hope it stays south of any land and dies in the sea. Of course, it will intensify to a major hurricane, or well, it's pretty possible. The forecast says it, and personally, I said that as well. So practically, this season is getting pretty intense and interesting. How many hurricanes, and I must say pretty intense hurricanes, has been has been presented and so far in this season. And I don't know where, but I've heard that it may possibly be as active as 2010 season was. I personally think it is possible, but in the same time, I don't think so.
Well, earlier
It will be
in
active.
the year we were thinking about something between a mix between 2010 and 1998, and this could be exactly that.
Yeah, I mean, it is pretty possible. Of course, an active season.
Because now you've got Katia, which could be doing a what was the storm in 20? Carl.
Yes, Carl was the last storm, or well, last significant storm to strike the state of Veracruz specifically, and Katia has a lot of potential to do so if people are not well prepared, and of course, if it gets pretty strong as well. Carl did 5.6 billion in damages, practically in Mexico. So it makes it one of the costliest storms in the country, and Katia could repeat that if intensifies pretty fast and gets strong as well. It depends, of course, the conditions. Katia looks pretty awful, I must say, but organizing pretty well as too, and moving pretty slow as well. So there are pretty good reasons that Katia could be a significant storm as well.
Yeah, not good. And there's Jose's track as well, and potential major hurricane, and watches and warnings may be issued again for the Leeward Islands and Barbuda. Gee.
There were a few more questions. Someone is asking if this if Irma can take a Matthew-esque path, and if you're looking at the models, then the answer is possibly yes. A lot of them take it skirting just off the Florida coast or just barely inland.
48 hours and you might be looking at Irma being in exactly the same position as Matthew was in, with the same intensity. You're just about 2 days away from Florida and not knowing whether it will hit or not. It's going to get very reminiscent and deja vu alert in 2 days' time.
And someone was also asking if there's a reason that recon flights have a cutoff point where they don't go over land, if it's because there's like ground data and stuff. Correct me if I'm mistaken, but there's if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure there's like airway laws in the air about something like that, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't know, honestly.
That's what I've heard. Don't quote me on that. I'm not saying that with a solid standing, so anyone watching, don't assume that is like just common knowledge or fact. And someone in chat asked if this can reach over 200 miles an hour. We've seen plenty of these questions. You guys probably agree with me that the answer is most likely no.
No, and I agree with that. Because, well, looks in first of all, Irma will travel in a lot of will have land interaction with the Española and Cuba, and this will weaken the storm. Second, the storm itself does well, personally I don't think it has like enough pace or enough, I don't know even, but I see pretty impossible to intensify as a 2000 oh my god, 200 miles per hour system. It has practically stayed this with the same intensity for 24 hours, so that practically seems that Irma practically is giving all it can to maintain as strong as it is now.
Yeah, and in the past 7 hours or so, it's been a trend in the past 12 hours. The storm has gotten more round, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure now that this is the lowest surface pressure with updates that have been measured with the storm so
Really?
far. Yes, 914. I think it might have gotten there last night and then increased. But the storm's definitely looking in a better physical condition, and it's at
the
lowest
cloud tops,
pressure.
but the eye is not quite as deep as it was.
Yeah, the eye isn't as deep. I'm just talking about how round the storm is. It was a bit more jagged towards one side
You
earlier
think
today.
so? I think it looked better last night.
I'm just talking about like 12 hours ago
Yeah.
or so.
Yeah. Well, it did deteriorate slightly overnight last night, and today not looking quite as good as it did yesterday.
Yeah, and someone asked if this can be a Category 4 once it approaches the United States. What do you guys think about that?
It will be. Almost.
Yes, it will.
Almost undoubtedly. Category 4 or more when it approaches the coast of Florida. Whether it will hit Florida or not as a landfall remains to be seen. The National Hurricane Center think it will make landfall at the moment as a Category 4 with 145 mile-an-hour winds, extremely close to Miami, but don't forget there's a big cone around that center point, so it could go anywhere within that cone or indeed outside of the cone. And don't forget, you're looking at the cone there, and you look at the red zone on the current storm's position and the orange zone around it. The red zone's hurricane force winds, the orange zone is tropical storm force winds, and look how much bigger than the cone that is. So if the storm was to track towards the edge of the cone, those tropical storm and hurricane force winds still extend out of the storm, and other areas outside of the cone will be affected if that was to occur.
And just to point out for the Category 4 thing, the current forecast calls for the area circled in yellow. That's 4 days out. It does call for Category 4 strength at that time in particular. So, like we said, it will be most likely a Category 4 at this time frame.
Yeah, it's pretty likely to see a Category 4 landfall.
I am here.
Good. and if we see a Category 4 landfall in Florida, it will be a complete disaster. There's practically Irma will travel all the Florida state, and of course this will mean a catastrophic destruction for the state. And well, just it's pretty hard to believe that Irma is still not surrendering. It is still showing a pretty powerful structure, a pretty awesome looking, the eye completely round, and practically there's no clouds covering the eye.
Yeah,
Completely.
Marcel, are you there? He was there briefly.
Oh,
I'm also
just
looking.
to point out,
I'm also looking at some aerial pictures of Barbuda, and a lot of the area is flooded as well. I have to say, to the credit, a lot of buildings are still standing, but there is a lot of debris that you can see from the edge. Just a whole island of debris, basically, is what you're seeing there.
yeah, and to point out what we were saying about the eye and stuff, if you're looking at the radar, which is on the screen, you can see the eye wall replacement cycle starting to complete itself on the western eye wall in particular. Let me draw that in. You can see the outer eye wall and inner eye wall starting to merge a bit there in the last few frames, as well as a little bit on the northeast side as well, but not completely. Caesar, you were saying how the storm is maintaining its intensity somehow. It's also surprising that it's doing so during an eye wall replacement cycle. We'll have recon in soon to confirm whether or not that's the case. But usually eye wall replacement cycles will weaken a storm slightly, but we haven't really seen such a thing with them over the past day or so.
That's right. Irma had an eye wall replacement cycle, and actually it haven't weakened, and this is something completely incredible, I must say. I don't know if the same happened with Harvey 2 weeks ago, and that's why it kept intensifying, even that was practically 30 miles off the coast of Texas. And this is pretty concerning because the storm hasn't weakened, and of course it had an annual replacement cycle. The wind field grew. The storm itself is not that big, but the wind field, it covers more places, so that means the more places will get bad conditions and with potential damage. The rain as well, it will be main issue. Of course, even more if people lives in the mountains. So the next days will be pretty crucial to see how will be the conditions in the Hispaniola and Cuba, because there are places that eventually has a lot and lots of mountains, could possibly cause landslides and pretty much potential damage as well.
And more of the colder cloud tops beginning to appear on the southwestern side of the eye wall now as well, although the southeastern side is looking ever so slightly more bare. However, it still looks very impressive indeed, and the double eye wall is what it appears to be at the moment, doesn't it?
Yeah, it seems so. Looking at the radar, those really pink cloud tops don't seem to be part of the inner eye wall, but part of the outer eye wall that's starting to contract a bit. You're talking about Haiti, especially northern Haiti. I'm very concerned for, because Haiti is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, and they still haven't recovered economically from the earthquake many years ago, or Matthew from last year, and they don't really have the funds to deal with these kind of things. And then on top of that, there's a lot of deforestation in Haiti that weakens the soil and stuff, along with high mountains that can cause devastating mudslides as well. And I just saw a question in chat. Someone's asking if Irma can make a Category 5 landfall in Cuba, and how strong will it be when it approaches the United States? Do you guys want to answer that?
Well, we were talking more about landfalls in Cuba the other day, weren't we, on the stream? And it would seem less likely at this point that there will be a landfall in Cuba. However, the storm will get close enough, I should think, to deliver hurricane-force winds to Cuba, though even that might be slightly doubtful as time goes on. It really depends what it does in the next 24 hours to answer questions on Cuba. If it goes south of forecast, it's more likely to impact Cuba, but probably not as a Category 5 because it will interact with the land a bit more. If it goes a bit further north, it's probably got less chance of impacting Cuba, but it may well be stronger for places like the Turks and Caicos Islands and the Bahamas, which could well get a Category 5 as well.
Yeah, someone in chat just said that the Miami-Dade County has issued mandatory evacuations for mobile homes and Zone A and barrier islands in Zone B. I'm going to confirm that or see if I can confirm that.
Well, I don't know much about zones, but barrier islands is probably a good idea.
Yeah, I think it is the best way to protect the islands, because they're pretty small and can easily get rushed by cyclone, because of course the storm surge is the biggest problem of it because of the size of these islands. And of course those islands will not cause anything to Irma. I mean, it won't make Irma weaken actually, because they are pretty small. They're practically plain as well. So all the water will practically flood those small islands, causing catastrophic destruction. And we saw this morning how bad the Barbuda got after Irma passed directly over them. So we may possibly see the same in the Turks and Caicos Islands, some of the Bahamas as well. So this is well, just about time as well.
Yeah, and sorry to interrupt, but if you go back to my screen share, I just confirmed that the Miami mayor has, or Miami-Dade County has issued mandatory evacuations for Zone A and B, and I'll color those in. So that's red and orange on the map that I have showing. And Zone B is in orange. So let me so this area that I'm coloring it or like highlighting with my not that great skills is yes, Zone B is also in the evacuation. So all of these areas right here, as well as this island area up here, are all in mandatory evacuation zones now. In preparation, 3.5 to 4 days ahead from Irma, that's what they're fearing from the storm. I'm not sure if other people weren't here earlier, but many states, including Florida, South Carolina, and Georgia, have issued states of emergency.
I think my mic was off, by the way, but I'm here now. Just that, you know, Key Biscayne and the Miami Beach area and downtown, and extending all the way south on the coast there.
Yeah, and as I was saying, the reason states issued states of emergency so early on is because
Getting windy
so
somewhere.
Access to, yeah, but doing so gives them access to federal funds, and because of how strained FEMA and other federal resources are due to damage and the cost of relieving and getting aid to victims of Harvey, there won't be as much money left around for damages from Irma. That's why they're putting out states of emergency so early on.
Yeah.
Cesar, it sounds like Hurricane Katia has arrived at your place.
Well, since Katia was only just a tropical low, Katia, well, monster of Katia practically caused a lot of rain in my place.
Oh, I was hearing the wind.
Week. Well, no, the wind is pretty low actually.
Oh, right. It must be you then, Cesar, making all the windy noise.
Well,
oh, sorry. Maybe it is my computer.
All right, Orlando.
Yeah, I was trying to say I'd just like to note that I think I could understand the reason why they're evacuating parts of the Miami area, and I think that's mainly because the fact that there's millions of people living in Miami, and to get all of those people out will take a very long time. So just in case if worst case scenario does manage to happen, I doubt they want everyone on the highway stuck while the hurricane's coming in.
Absolutely, and I think I saw 1 or 2 webcams already from Florida today with huge queues already.
Yeah, someone asked in chat that they live in Pompano Beach, Florida. Should I evacuate? Can you take screen share off of me for a moment just so I can check where that is quickly?
Yeah, my knowledge of Florida is a bit rusty after Matthew. I think that's a bit further north if I'm not mistaken, but I might be wrong.
Let me take a look.
Not that much is further south of Miami anyway, so... In the meantime, Marcel, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on Irma and its... whether you think the models are correct in trending east, I guess?
If the models are trending east, it will be a very serious storm for Florida and a catastrophic storm.
And Pompano Beach is just north of Fort Lauderdale, isn't it?
Yeah, there aren't evacuations there currently. I just checked. But you pay attention for sure to local news and information about potential mandatory or involuntary evacuations that officials and local administrators may issue in the coming days. And someone asked if Irma will hit Delaware. According to models, none of them show it coming up that way, and I don't know if you guys want to comment on that.
You're a bit early. That's all I can say.
Regardless, that would still be 6-7 days out. So that even if that were to potentially happen, it's still a lot can change with that. And I'll do a quick check to see if recon reached the storm yet, because there is a plane heading towards the storm.
And whilst we do that, there's not much left for us to do right now whilst we wait for the next update. We will be ending the stream at the next National Hurricane Center update, which is in about half an hour. And then we will continue with more recorded updates throughout tonight into tomorrow.
Someone also asked if there's any evacuation orders near Cocoa, Florida. From what I've heard, all of the evacuation orders that I've seen right now, the only major ones that have really been announced that I've found are for Miami in particular.
Yeah, Cocoa is further north as well.
So those areas don't have evacuations ordered yet, but like I said to the previous person asking, pay attention to local news and your officials to see if any evacuation orders are issued.
But you got to think, if you're near the coast, along the coast of Florida, if you're, I don't know, maybe a few blocks away, you could be looking at maybe some storm surge and stuff. I don't know what Matthew was like down there in general, but a few places got bad flooding, and I'd expect something pretty similar for this too. At the moment, the best thing we can compare this to for Florida impacts is Matthew, so that's the sort of scope we're looking at the moment, and the measuring stick. But exactly where it goes yet, it could be worse or less worse than Matthew, depending on which model it decides to take, if any at all.
Yeah, and then a lot of the model forecasts you can see hint to a similar track up the Florida coast that Matthew took. So at least for track in that area, Matthew is a good analog to see. So if it holds out this track in 2 days or so, and you do live in an area that was evacuated during Matthew, you should consider evacuating again.
Yes.
If you guys have any questions, just put them in chat. I am looking at chat on another monitor, so I will read all questions I can see.
Monitors everywhere in Force 13 HQ as we continue monitoring the storm, and we try and do our best with the service that we provide here under limiting circumstances, not only by my own poor condition at the moment, but also by the means that we have. And this year most of our streaming capabilities are a little bit downgraded because of lots of other work that's being done elsewhere within the project, such as the reworking of the websites. The Force13.com website will be coming back very soon. It technically already is. If you go there, there's a little holding page, but there will be new content on there soon, and obviously we'll hopefully provide an online text service, text and graphical service there as well, for people who might struggle to keep up with the videos, either because we do videos all the time and at unpredictable times, or because of stream difficulties, which sometimes occur. We try and make ourselves accessible as much as possible. We're of course already on the social mediums. You can search Force 13 on Facebook and Twitter, and you can also add Fool 13 on Skype, FOOL13, and add extension 9094 on Discord. And we also have chat rooms there as well.
Yeah, some people were asking about Jose, so I'll take a look at that quickly for people.
Well, if anyone doesn't mind, could I read out the watches and warnings?
Yeah,
Yes,
go ahead.
it's
I'll
been some
pull
time.
up Jose's satellite and track because someone wanted to see that as well.
But know that these warnings may change very soon.
Yeah, they most likely will. Currently, a hurricane warning is in effect for British Virgin Islands, U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Vieques, and Culebra, Dominican Republic from Cabo Engano to the northern border with Haiti, northern border with the Dominican Republic to Le Mole, St. Nicholas, southeastern Bahamas, and the Turks and Caicos Islands. Central Bahamas hurricane watch is in effect for Cuba, Matanzas province eastward to Guantanamo province, northwestern Bahamas. A tropical storm warning is in effect for Dominican Republic and south of Cabo and Ghana, westward to the southern border with Haiti. Haiti from south of Limon, St. Nicholas to Port-au-Prince. Cuba, provinces of Guantanamo, Holguin, and Las Tunas. And the hurricane warning means that hurricane conditions are expected somewhere within the warning area. Preparations to protect life and property should be rushed to completion. And hurricane watch basically means that hurricane conditions are possible within the watch area and in the next 48 hours or so.
Yeah, and I also on screen share I highlight that with some color coding and stuff. So that's all the warnings. Someone's asking about Jose, so I'll pull up the map for that quickly as well.
Yeah.
Here's the map of Jose. We were highlighting this earlier, but some of the islands that were just impacted right in the epicenter of Irma are really close to where this cone could be. In fact, some of the islands are actually in the cone already. And if this storm track shifts a little bit further to the west...
Not only that, but the islands that are in the cone are the islands that had the eye of Irma.
Yeah, they were the brunt of the storm. There's at least 3 confirmed landfalls in these areas. But track shifts a little bit further west or further south in these areas, then you could see hurricane watches and warnings going back up for these areas that were just hit by one of the strongest storms ever recorded in Atlantic Basin history, that just plowed through these islands and left absolutely devastating damage around. And the same person also wanted to see the satellites for Jose, so I will show the visible floater. Even though it's nighttime, you'll be able to see it as a different shade. So here's the current images for Jose going into the night. It does have a pretty nice feeder band going into it now. So that's currently Jose. It is a hurricane now, expected to intensify into a major hurricane in the coming days.
Yeah.
Along with the potential track shift to the west, if such a thing were to happen, how bad that would be for the islands. You have to couple that with the track forecast saying that it will peak around the time as well as a Category 3 hurricane. And both of those things could be potentially catastrophic for areas that would already be strained with tons of damage there already just a few days later. I'm assuming you will know more than me. I don't know the answer to this. Someone asked if Ivan was annular. Do you know the answer to that?
Not to my knowledge.
No, Ivan wasn't an annular hurricane.
Yeah, it wasn't annular.
And someone said that they live in Coral Springs. Should they evacuate? That's Florida. If you're not in Miami, there weren't mandatory evacuation orders issued yet. But consider it. It's like you don't need to evacuate for a couple days still, but pay attention to the local authorities and officials that if you hear a mandatory or involuntary evacuation order, you should probably heed to it and evacuate from the area. And someone said, let me check on recon, someone mentioned it. There's a plane that just took off in the middle of the storm. Actually, 309. And I don't know if it's actually that or if it just got there, because I'm pretty sure this is the same one that was earlier, just updated its track.
Maybe.
It went around this island. It looks like this is going for an I-pass at the moment. I would assume from the southeast to northwest. There is no larger shot, but that would be my assumption based off of the movement of the plane. And someone asked if Matthew was bigger. I don't know if they mean strength or wind radius and stuff.
Well, in wind radius and its size, of course, Matthew was bigger.
Yeah.
But of course, it was much weaker when it passed through the coast of Florida.
Although, Irma could gain strength over the next few days.
Its wind field will definitely expand, probably, as eyewall replacement cycles occur. And the reason Matthew was probably larger in wind size, not only eyewall replacement cycles, but it passed over Hispaniola and Eastern Cuba, which are mountainous, and that can help spread the wind radius out even more than it already is. It exasperates it.
Something like that. Any progress on that eyewall replacement cycle that may or may not be happening? What do you think?
It hasn't looked like it in the past hour or so.
The northeastern side of that inner eye looks very ropey in that latest frame.
It does look weaker, it's just that it doesn't look like the inner eye wall's been contracting more in the past hour or so. Because you see at the start of it's trying to close in, but it's harder for it to, for some reason right now. Someone asked if people in Savannah should evacuate in the next 4 days. Like I said, pay attention to local authorities and officials. If they say you should evacuate, then you should evacuate from the area. Someone also asked, what are the chances Jose dies off and gets absorbed by Irma? Zero.
No.
We had questions
They're not even
like
close
this.
enough for such a thing to even.
We had questions like this during Matthew and Nicole.
They're too far. They're too far away from each other to do something like that.
We had identical questions.
Yeah. And looking at Irma, at least for Puerto Rico, you see the heavier bands are starting to wash through the middle and eastern parts of the island. The very western, southwest part of the island haven't really been getting too much rain yet, according to the radar, fortunately. But these areas, especially in the mountains that are in central Puerto Rico, they're prone to mudslides and stuff. So that's something that can be potentially very harmful.
Well, we're just staying here for another 15 minutes or so whilst the updates come out from the National Hurricane Center. They will be intermediate advisories on both Irma and Katia, because warnings are currently in effect. Whether warnings will change very much remains to be seen. Warnings might change for Irma, and maybe the warnings will be discontinued on the Virgin Islands, considering that the storm is moving away. Obviously, it is over there now, pretty much, and central parts of Puerto Rico, including the capital, San Juan, will be experiencing the worst of the storm right now. Update from Hurricane Katia, still 75 miles an hour, 992 millibars, no changes in the watches in the Hurricane Watch, which is still in effect from Tupan to Laguna Verde in Mexico. No real surprises there. Rainfall could be 2 to 5 inches over far southern Tamaulipas, northeast Puebla and southern Veracruz through Saturday morning, and could be 5 to 10 inches over northern Veracruz, and isolated amounts of 15 inches are possible from Katia. Irma's advisory should be out momentarily, and we'll see what the latest is. I doubt they'll change the intensity, do you?
I don't know.
Probably not.
Kept it at 185.
We can barely hear you, Isaac.
Yeah, I said they've kept it at 185 for the longest time, so.
Yes.
I would assume not, just because they haven't had any recon in the storm to find.
Well, they didn't listen to the last one though, when it didn't find 185-mile-an-hour winds.
That's true as well, but at the same time, I was also finding a deepening pressure.
Bit of a conflict going on there, isn't there?
Yeah. Someone asked if the track can move west, and I think you can agree with me when I say, at least for Florida, they said they live in Coral Springs. This far out, the track can change east or west. Anywhere in that cone is an area where the storm could potentially end up.
Certainly.
And someone else said
and those models will keep flip-flopping.
Someone else asked if there's a hurricane watch for Florida. The watch will say if it's within 2 or 3 days or so, which it is not right now. So
no hurricane watches for Florida, and there won't be hurricane watches for Florida until at least, what, tomorrow daytime?
At least tomorrow evening or early Friday-ish.
Probably tomorrow daytime, because I don't think they'll be able to contain themselves any longer.
Yeah, it seems so. Especially after Matthew didn't make a direct hit. It could be important to put those warnings and evacuations up earlier to make sure that more people heed them and actually get out. Because after there's a semi-miss like that, people act like they're safe, even though they're not necessarily safe. And someone asked if the mountains of Cuba and Hispaniola will knock down the wind speeds a bit.
Yes. Well, it depends how close it gets.
I think we can read that to some, like, for sure, yes. It depends on how close it gets to the core of the storm. It's the mild tracks lately, and the storm have gone a little bit north of the forecast. So
for the northern coast of Hispaniola, I'd expect the same as what Puerto Rico's getting right now.
I'm looking at the radar, and the latest few frames, looks like the northeastern eye wall, the inner one is opening up to let the outer eye wall just close in around it.
So that's interesting, and might weaken the storm slightly.
It could go down to 180 or 175, but that is
probably
still
already is down to 180, 175, to be honest.
Yeah. But it's still
but it will still stay as a Category 5, no doubt. Could be wrong. Some storms have had catastrophic eye wall replacement cycles from the storm's point of view, but I doubt it will occur this time.
I mean, it's been maintaining its intensity, at least pressure-wise, mostly, and you can argue with wise, but recon hasn't really necessarily supported that, despite now this is the second eye wall replacement cycle in the past day. It's still held steady, and its pressure actually deepened earlier today during the start of the eye wall replacement cycle.
Yeah, so I don't know if anyone else in our chat right now would like to say anything before we go off the air in a few more minutes.
Well, I'd just like to say that regardless, even if Irma was to weaken or is to just remain the same intensity, it still is a very dangerous storm overall, and people should take this thing seriously. Just because it's weakening, maybe it's going to weaken by 5-10 miles per hour, still doesn't make a difference in the category, and it's only a 5 to 10 mile per hour difference. That's not a really big jump, to be honest. And with that being said, I think this could be really, really bad, regardless, whoever's being impacted by this. And if you're in the Turks and Caicos or coastal Hispaniola, you should keep an eye on this storm, as hurricane conditions are likely for your region.
And looking at radar, it looks like I haven't seen a radar in an hour, in like 2 hours, so I might be a little less up to date here. But it looks like the outer eye wall, the newer eye wall that's forming, seems to be. It looks like San Juan is it's just offshore San Juan, Puerto Rico right now. I believe so. It looks like it, but it could be deceiving. And but that's what it looks like right now. So the coastal areas might be getting those stronger winds around San Juan right now.
Yeah.
We'll ought to know at the next update when the National Hurricane Center tells us how strong the winds have been there. They usually do say. I don't think they've even had hurricane force winds in San Juan yet. Hurricane force winds are quite likely though. But if everyone's prepared accordingly in Puerto Rico, they should get away without too much problems compared to those other islands.
Someone asked in chat if this was the strongest and longest lived Cat 5. No to both questions. This isn't the strongest. It's tied for second strongest wind speed wise with 4 other storms, not pressure wise, and it's not the longest lived. However, it does hold the record now for the longest continuous Category 5 storm with winds above 180 miles an hour, which is 30 going on 33 hours now.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing how long it's lasted.
And someone also asked if Jose is predicted to become a major hurricane, and the answer to that is yes, it is.
Yeah.
Having said that, the National Hurricane Center are going a little bit on the high end of the model guidance for it, so it looks like at the moment it's going to be borderline. I mean, we thought for quite a while that Irma might reach a Category 4 or 5 intensity, but Jose shouldn't get towards that. Could you imagine if it happened again?
Well, there should be upwelling behind Irma's path, so I wouldn't expect it to anyways.
Yeah, but it could still quite easily get to major status, and if it deviates north a little bit of Irma, it could still intensify up there.
And looking at radar yet again, looking at the total rainfall from this so far, it seems that San Juan has received rain of around 3 to 4 inches, if I'm not mistaken. There, looking at the radar, inland areas are up to, unless that's a radar glitch, it might be a radar glitch, are up to 6 to 7 inches. It looks like they're in a little pocket of 10 inches, which is probably radar glitch.
It could, you never know.
Someone asked a good question. I think you two are better suited to answer it than me.
Well, first of all, Strat, I just want you to actually take a look at something else on that. On the sidebar there, if you see the rainfall storm total loop, if you click on that, you can see the storm total rainfall that's occurred in San Juan area.
Yep. And someone asked in chat while we're looking at this, you guys are probably better suited to answer it than me. They asked, is it normal for a Category 5 storm to stay or maintain its strength as a Category 5 storm for as long as Irma has?
No.
I mean, there's a reason that...
Never underestimate what's on the realms of possibility. We will never know how strong the Great Hurricane was, but it was probably at least as strong as Irma, and probably held its intensity for a similar length of time. Granted, a bit further south than in October, affected the islands more directly. That killed 20,000 people, by the way. And aren't you so glad that we've at least got the early warning systems in place with the satellites and with the forecasts that can tell us when the storm's going to happen, rather than being sitting ducks like they were back in 1780.
And
the update's out. I've got to interrupt you.
Okay.
No change at all, not even in the warnings. 19.1 north, 66.1 west, 50 miles north of San Juan, moving at 16 miles per hour.
So they kept everything the same. I'm assuming mostly because they don't really have any new information. They're actually, right as we're ending the stream, they're doing an iPass right now, actually. So we're just going to miss out on that. And, yeah, back to the Category 5 thing. I mean, no, they're not usually supposed to hold it this long. That's why Irma is already a record holder for maintaining strength this high up for such a long time. And we are looking at the total accumulated rainfall so far.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
It does look like the highest in Puerto Rico right now looks to be around, especially in the center where some of the heaviest rains have been, around 7 to 8 inches of rain, roughly.
Around 3 inches in San Juan.
And if you saw that little area, that looks like an area of 10 inches over there, to the east of that.
To the east, right under that city name there, right?
There is an option to take the place name labels off lower down below the display.
Oh god, I'm being dumb right now, so I can't really see.
Well, the check
right.
marks are.
There we go. Yeah, it seems like there's a little influx there, around 10 inches or so. I don't know if that's an area, because you see an area around it that's like, 7, 8,
It's probably
9,
a mountain.
Yeah, I would assume so. Also, tick off warnings. But you can obviously see the track of the hurricane as it moves west-northwest
Yeah,
above it.
absolutely.
And that outer eye wall is beginning to choke out the inner one.
Yeah, if I can go back to show that. The northeast eye was actually trying to shore up again a little bit, but it looks like it's starting to merge with the outer eye wall to complete the cycle. As well as just in general in the past hour or so, you see the outer eye wall closing in more to converge with the center one. And
how long will that recon be for any more data?
The next batch is like, it's every 10 minutes or so. So
what's staying on for another 10 minutes?
If we want to, yeah. I mean, it comes around every like 9 or 8 minutes into every 10 minutes, so it'd be around 10 minutes or so.
Talking about recon is just about to enter the eye wall of Irma right now. So far, their highest gusts they've recorded so far seems to be around 96 knots, 10-second winds, flight level, and they're about to go into the eye wall, and it should update within the next 5 minutes or so, I believe, if I'm correct here. So that'll be interesting to know. I just wanted to relay that information. You go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, someone in chat asked if Irma's going to become the most powerful hurricane in the Atlantic since Katrina. At least wind-wise, it already has been. Pressure-wise,
what, did Wilma not exist?
Let's say he means since 2005. I don't know.
Wilma's the most powerful hurricane in the Atlantic Ocean by wind and pressure, in my opinion.
Yeah, here's just the recon level. Right before going into the eye wall, it's around 100 knots flight level, a little over 90 knots at surface extrapolation levels. And pressure starting to drop. It's the most interesting thing is going to see, because we're assuming that the winds would be just slightly weaker than 185. We'll see whether or not the pressures continue to drop during the eye wall replacement cycle.
Just take a look at the eye temperature, and it would appear to be something like, if it wants to load for me, but I think the eye temperature's gone down a little bit.
I know the last recon pass they did, they measured 22 degrees Celsius eye temperature.
Well, wait. I think the eye temperature's gone down significantly in the last few hours, because all I'm getting now from the satellite is 12 Celsius. When it was 20 yesterday. It was 22 yesterday at peak. So it's now down to just 12. And whilst the eye wall is flaring up around it, I think this storm has weakened a little bit, and the eye wall replacement cycle will compound that somewhat. Probably will stay as a category 5, but it's weakening at the moment.
It seems so.
That's a good thing, by the way.
It is. It's a relief to see that it's starting to let up, but just because it's letting up a little bit doesn't mean that it isn't extremely powerful. There's a reason that the hurricane scale ends at 5, because anything at that point and beyond is catastrophic, and on the scale, as winds go up in strength, they get exponentially more. They cause exponentially more damage, and once you reach Category 5, entire areas can be completely leveled.
We're just waiting for another, what, minute or so until the next recon update?
Roughly 5 minutes or so. Someone asked, why does the eye temperature matter in a hurricane?
It's an indicator when we're using satellite observations. A warmer eye almost always correlates to a stronger hurricane, and the cloud tops alone don't indicate that. You've got to have the eye and the good eye temperature within the eye as well to go along with those cloud tops that you're looking at, and that's where SATOPS came from. The way that Force 13 has measured satellite presentation of storms in the last year or two, and it factors both the temperature of the eye and the temperature minimum and maximum in the cloud tops in the eye wall, and comes up with a number. A little bit simple at the moment. We will be working on a newer way to do that later on this year, and that will give us even better results when trying to determine the intensity of the storm when recon isn't available. But recon and surface observations and radar observations always come before satellite observations and anyone's interpretation of them. Go ahead, Strat.
I was going to say, it's going to be interesting to see, at least eye temperature-wise, what the recon pass-through says, because last time it passed a few hours ago, it actually said around 22 degrees Celsius. So it'll be very interesting to see what it says around the eye.
Yeah, that would be very interesting.
Because you don't really expect it to drop 10 degrees Celsius in an hour or so, considering its current strength and how its at least satellite presentation is maintained. And someone also asked what air pressure is in a hurricane, what that means.
Well, air pressure isn't just in hurricanes, of course. It's measured all around the world. Extratropical cyclones have an air pressure. It's usually an indicator of how strong a storm is. So when a cyclone becomes more impressive, the air pressure lowers, and that is what, in part, generates a storm surge, because the lower pressure in the atmosphere in the storm actually physically lifts the water level.
Someone asked a great question in chat. They're asking if this hurricane will hit the Czech Republic.
Did you have to read that one out? You know that's a pointless question.
Yeah, I do. But we're just waiting, so thought I would.
Strat's desperate over there.
Yes.
I'm desperate to say something or anything.
Well, someone else say something for a while.
Well, Orlando hasn't talked much, so... Want to go, Orlando?
Come on.
Orlando, you have people in the Caribbean, don't you? Any news from them?
No news as of yet. But most likely they have pictures on Facebook and things like that.
Orlando.
Right now the last thing I heard was they were just getting ready for things like buying water, supplies, things like that.
Sorry for interrupting you over here, but the new recon just came in, and the lowest pressure they found so far is 909.1.
Really?
That is actually deeper than earlier. That's not. Is that fully through the eyeball? Looks like
it's fully through it. It's fully through
it.
It
says
look at the surface data analysis and see what that says.
Yeah, it says 909.1 millibars, which is 2.5 millibars deeper than the previous pass that they did a few hours ago.
That's a flight level?
Yes, that is flight level. Both of them were flight level.
Well, the pressure's getting to correlate a little bit more with what... And I gotta tell you right now, it's pretty much what the HMON was saying would happen in its early Category 5 runs.
And
yeah.
In terms of 10-second wind speed, it seems to be 145 knots not flight level, surface wind.
Surface is in between 145 and 150. Flight levels around 150-ish.
So that's a little bit lower than what we've been witnessing recently. And the pressure-wind correlation would appear to be equalizing a little bit.
But the eye temperature at flight levels 24 degrees Celsius about.
Really?
Yeah, if you look at the image I'm showing right
Yeah,
now.
yeah, of course. Well, we're not seeing it on satellite, I can tell you that, but hey.
The observation, the temperature, flight level temperature when they're going through the eye, right around there, that's where it peaks, and that's in between 20 and 25 Celsius, if you see what I'm screen sharing at the moment.
Yeah, yeah, it's there.
So it looks like satellite and recon observation are different at the moment. And I think because we got all this stuff, I think we're calling it for now, right?
Finishing up. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're done for this evening on our live coverage, indeed. But there's a lot more to come from this storm, as we know, and it's going to be a very long week for everyone involved here at our team and beyond. But we're sitting in armchairs watching what's going on, whereas what we aim for our audience to be are the people who are in and around this storm, to keep them hopefully safe, definitely informed, and we keep monitoring this storm Irma, which will be a name that will live long in the memories of many people who have already been through it and may still be yet to go through it in the time to come. That's it from now. We'll have more updates throughout tonight on the channel. Subscribe if you haven't, because we will have more updates on there throughout the life of Irma and any other storm that occurs around the world. We've been doing this for about 2.5 years, tracking storms on live events, and we feel it's the best way to get the information out. But we also do several recorded videos too, whenever the time calls. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter, search Force13 all in text. You can also add Fool13 on Skype, FOOL13, and add extension 9094 on Discord. But that's it for now. There's 3 storms to track, 2 generating warnings, and Jose could be headed towards the Leeward Islands next. Let's, for goodness sake, hope not. Until then, good night. We'll be back with more streams tomorrow, and updates in between. Stay safe out there. Irma is still around, and still the powerful beast that it's been for over a day getting on 2. Good night.
Good night.